Okay, check 1 2, check 1 2, testing, testing. Let me know how everything sounds. Let me know how everything looks. How is the connection? Please comment in the chat and comment down below. Hit the like button, it helps fuel the algorithm. I think we're going to have a good stream tonight. We are going to be discussing idealism versus sentient singularity theory versus materialism, and what are the differences. We're going to be discussing Bernardo Kastrup, who's kind of the champion for idealism, and a lot of the things that I agree with him on and some things that I disagree with him on. But he gave a pretty interesting lecture, and we're going to discuss it. So, like I said, please hit the like button. It helps fuel the algorithm. Also, comment in the chat or in the comments down below what time works best for you and what day of the week works best for you to watch these live streams. So what time of day and what day of the week. I'm not going to guarantee that I will pick that time, but I'm trying to figure that out going forward into 2025. We will talk more about it on the next live stream, which I don't believe will be the next one, but will be the next one. Maybe it will be the next one. It's the next one's the day, will probably be the Thursday, the day after Christmas Day. So we will discuss, some things then, have a kind of informal, nice, reflective live stream. So like I said, please hit the like button. It helps fuel the algorithm. Comment in the chat how everything is going. And we are going to get started. So let's get this. Pull this up. This is the lecture that we're going to be discussing. It is called Refuting Materialism. Here. And it is on the channel Adventures in Awareness. I haven't watched any other streams done on this channel, but it seems very interesting and very much focused on, the same kind of things that we're focused on this channel. It's got a lot of Bernardo Kastrup, some Michael Levin, a number of people that we've discussed here. So definitely give them a subscribe, and the full link to the full lecture is below, and you can watch that, and you can like their video just like you like this video, hopefully. But I highly recommend always watching the full lectures. So Bernardo Kastrup, for those who do not know, very prominent figure in the discussions regarding the future of physics and the philosophy of idealism and materialism, and all the implications that one of those two paths apparently would have going forward on our morals and on our society, on our science, and he's frequently discussing the philosophy of science. So here we go. Bernardo Kastrup is a Dutch philosopher and computer scientist, best known for his work in the field of consciousness studies, particularly his development of analytic idealism, a form of metaphysical idealism grounded in the analytic philosophical tradition. He has written several books, and he is the executive director of the Essentia Foundation, which curates and publishes the latest analytic and scientific indications that metaphysical materialism is fundamentally flawed. We're going to talk a little bit about his approach tonight, because I think that his approach is, it can be useful, but I don't think that it's probably the most constructive either. So first, idealism in philosophy is known as philosophical idealism or metaphysical idealism. It is the set of metaphysical perspectives asserting that most fundamentally reality is equivalent to mind, spirit, or consciousness, that reality is entirely a mental construct, or that ideas are the highest type of reality or have the greatest claim to being considered real because there are different types of idealism. It is difficult to define the term uniformly. I would say that's definitely true. But basically, this is the on-paper definition, that most fundamentally reality is equivalent to mind, spirit, or consciousness. This is the same exact assertion, essentially, as sentient singularity theory, which is that existence is initially, inevitably, and eternally, a singular sentient being, which is a mind. A sentient being is a mind. A mind is a sentient being, which is a sentient singularity in sentient singularity theory. So it's a singular sentience. You are a singular sentient being. That's why you are a sentient singularity. And existence would be a sentient singularity. And we'll get into whether or not the universe is a sentient singularity, or whether it is a mind, whether it is conscious, whether it is consciousness, whether it is, in consciousness. This is a question that Bernardo asks in this lecture. Very interesting thing for us to discuss. And it says here, Indian philosophy contains some of the first defenses of idealism. Epistemologically, idealism is accompanied by rejection of the possibility of knowing the existence of anything independent of mind. Exactly. We talk about that all the time. The truest thing that you can know is that the truest thing that I can know is that I am. The truest thing that you can know is that you are. Ontologically, idealism asserts that the existence of all things depends upon the mind. Thus, ontological idealism rejects the perspectives of physicalism and dualism. In contrast to materialism, idealism asserts the primacy of consciousness as the origin and prerequisite of all phenomena. So this is very similar on paper to sentient singularity theory, but it doesn't seem to have the same coherence when it comes to and I guess intuitiveness to it when it comes to just the conceptualization of the theory. And I think that that's partially because of the name. And I want to touch on this first, is that I've said here before that the name of a theory, of a fundamental theory, is extremely important. Of any theory is extremely important. The theory of relativity, very, very, descriptive and intuitive name. It's the beginning of the theory. Any name of a theory is the beginning of the theory. If you change the name of the theory, you change the theory. People don't think about that as being true, but it's absolutely true. And because it's the first, I guess, introduction. It's the intro to the introduction. It's the abstract to the abstract of your theory. And so the name is extremely important. It's not something that is just, could be anything. It has to be as concise a description of what you're asserting as is possible. And I think that there is an issue with idealism in that it is considered to be by many as a potential candidate as a fundamental theory, and I don't think that that is the right way to look at it. And I think that that is what makes it kind of like takes away from its usefulness and its truth. But that doesn't make it not true. It just means that it's not meant to be a candidate for a fundamental theory, or it shouldn't be a candidate for a fundamental theory. I don't think. Just as materialism should not be a candidate for a fundamental theory. These are, unless you are really going to assert that these are the things that are most fundamental, but that's not what idealism actually asserts, because idealism asserts that consciousness or mind is fundamental. Minds are fundamental. that's not the same as ideas being fundamental. Ideas are not more fundamental than the minds that contain the ideas. And that helps us, I think, orient within this this debate, I guess, of materialism and consciousness and mind and ideas and God and physics and whatever you want to focus on, but it's really it's a discussion about what is existence. I don't like the term "what is reality." I'm not saying I don't say it by accident sometimes, but I don't like that phrase, phrase or word reality. At least when talking about what is fundamental, it's not. It's misleading for many reasons we'll talk about, but we can talk about existence. What is existence fundamentally according to philosophical idealism? It is consciousness on paper. But if you didn't read into it, you would assume that idealism would assert that ideas are what is, the most fundamental, I guess you could say, nature. The most fundamental nature of existence is that existence is ideas, and that is not correct. So a lot of this is a definitional. It's just an issue of definitions and how you choose to define things like the universe and reality, and we kind of got to get on the same page with some of these things. But you need a cosmological framework that lets you do that, and we don't currently have that. So we'll talk about it. What's up, memes? How's the sound and the picture? Let me know in the chat. But like I said, please hit the like button, and we will show the first clip now. This, I think that it's important, I'll preface this, that it's more constructive to focus on what things are than what things aren't. You don't want what I call an anti-ideology, which is like non-dualism. It's like, what is the world? It isn't dual. It's versus monism. Monism saying everything is one. Non-dualism is saying that things aren't a duality. Well, what is it? A triality? Is it a monality? Why wouldn't you just say it's a concept is monistic instead of saying it's non-dual? This is something that's very much a universal issue when it comes to a concept being constructive. It's like libertarianism versus anti-fascism. On paper, they are the same thing. They are not the same thing in practice, because one of them allows you to build because it gives you a goal. Liberty, goal. We want more liberty. Anti-fascism is not a goal. It's just a reaction. Okay? And a reaction is not a goal. A goal, and the achievement of a goal, requires setting of a goal, which is not reactive. It is an active process. So you don't want to say, I'm anti-fascist. You want to say, I'm a libertarian, essentially. I'm not saying that these people have the same ideology. I'm saying that if you look at the terms, they seem like they would be advocating for the same thing, and they're not. Same thing with, anti-anything, anti-theism, anti-racism, anti-fascism, whatever it may be. You're setting yourself up to be intrinsically destructive. And idealism is very much, when it's discussed, is discussed in a way of materialism. It's anti-materialistic. That's not enough. Okay? I'm not saying it's not useful. I'm saying that's not enough. And you will see that in this lecture, because the lecture is called Refuting Materialism. It's not called, arguing for idealism or arguing for, whatever you would call it, sentientism. That would really be what, idealism is supposed to assert is fundamental on paper. But it's refuting materialism, which makes it kind of, it limits the usefulness of the lecture, but it doesn't make it not useful. It just means it limits its constructiveness. So just keep that in mind, but we will look at the first clip. Always keep that in mind. You don't ever want an anti-ideology.
And on record is this: any sensation in animals, be they bacteria or humans, involves some sort of qualia. In other words, some sort of experiential quality. For example, what does it feel like to the crustacean Daphnia or water flea, mostly we call it a water flea, to detect a predatory fish in its pond? Now, he's talking about not only water fleas, but bacteria as feeling things, as having experiential states, having phenomenal states. Now, a bacterium is a unicellular organism. It does not have a nervous system. According to materialism, a single cell cannot be conscious, cannot have experiential states, because experiential states are supposed to emerge as an epiphenomenon, a sort of side effect of particular complex arrangements of matter that are much more complex than a single bacteria. So right at the start, Jerry Coyne already contradicts materialism, and he is unknowingly and very naively endorsing some form of panpsychism or idealism. He's basically saying that you do not need complex material arrangements for phenomenal states or experiential states to arise. They are there from the bacteria on, and he's associating that with life, which is precisely analytic idealism. It's precisely my version, my theory, if you will, about what's going on. That localized consciousness is associated with life at all levels, all kinds of life. But he is, in principle, ostensibly defending materialism with this statement. Another one: I have never heard a definition of materialism that requires quantitative measurement. But that's Kastrup's definition, and it seems to be one he's confected to rule out consciousness as a material phenomenon or the result of a material phenomenon. So basically what he's saying is that qualities, experiential states, are not epiphenomenal, because that's what materialism says. Materialism says that all that exists is matter, and matter is exhaustively defined in terms of measurable quantities: mass, charge, momentum, space-time position, frequency, amplitude, whatever. And there is nothing left after you've described matter with quantities. There is nothing left to be said about it. That's the definition of matter under materialism. It does not entail qualities of any kind. The qualities are epiphenomenal. They emerge out of certain complex arrangements.
Okay, so here's the issue with kind of, I think, what he, just this, with what Bernardo is saying, even though what I agree that what he's saying is that there are, with regarding the issues of materialism, but I would just, I don't know who Jerry Coyne is, but I would assume that he would just say, no, actually, I don't believe that you need a system more complex than the organelles of a cell in order for experience to be manifested. You know, he would just say that that's complex enough. He wouldn't necessarily, it doesn't, materialism does not seem to imply that a cell is not complex enough in order to manifest experience, you know, or I guess, yeah, manifest experience. But even though I'm not a I don't want to say I'm not a materialist. I don't even like that to say that. But the issue is this: it's that we need to have better definitions for materialism and idealism, and we need them to be centered, though, and grounded in a more fundamental conceptualization of existence. We don't have that, and so both of these concepts keep spinning around each other constantly. Materialism, idealism, materialism, idealism, material. It's like it never ends. This is a problem, and you need a grounded structure that they're both kind of built on and oriented around in order to actually start constructing a logically coherent, framework. And so sentient singularity theory, I believe, is that, or the idea that existence is a singularity of sentience that is partitioning itself into a infinitely growing number of sentient singularities, or singularities of sentience, or sentient beings. And so sentient beings are the essential foundation, which is essentially what idealism asserts on paper, but in practice, it doesn't really do this. That's partially because the name is not actually describing of what its fundamental assertion kind of is. It's describing of what its emergent assertion kind of is, which is that if existence is fundamentally sentient beings, and aka minds, then ideas are what we perceive. And that makes a lot of sense, but that makes it not a fundamental theory, which is fine because Bernardo hasn't even said that it's a fundamental theory. In fact, in this lecture, we'll see later on, he says that it's not, and that it's just more fundamental than materialism. And I would agree with that. And there is a directionality to materialism and idealism that must be established. But first you have to define them properly. So what should idealism mean, really? It should mean that our experiences out of what we perceive, not only within our own mind, are ideas, but also the experiences that we perceive outside of as being beyond our own mind. I'm not saying they are outside of our own mind entirely, but they are perceived as being beyond our own mind, are also ideas. You are a mind inside a mind inside a mind inside a mind, and the ideas of the mind that you're within are above you in a hierarchy, or they are experienced as concrete to you. They are your world because there is a hierarchy between the mind that you are within and the mind that you are. So your cells are minds. They are inside of your mind. Your mind and your thoughts which includes the perception of that which you perceive as beyond you, are all they form the world, the concrete world that your cells have to adhere to. The thoughts of the mind that we're within, that is the universe, form what we experience as the concrete material world that we cannot override. Your thoughts cannot be overridden by your cells. Your thoughts can actually constrain the world that is your cells, and that your thoughts include the perception of that which is beyond you. And the thoughts of the mind that we're within are also not able to be overridden by the thoughts of your individual cells, because your cells are inside you and you are inside of the universal mind. So which we could call creation, but or the logos, you could call it, which is the generative structure of existence that is also a mind, which is also it is created essentially by the most fundamental mind, which is existence itself. So we'll get into this, but you need this kind of framework in order to actually even start to make the most sense of concepts like idealism and materialism, because you need an order to them. Neither one is fake. You just have the definitions wrong. And you can say, well, no, the definitions aren't wrong. You can choose what you define something. To some degree, that's true. To some degree, it's not. You usually have degrees of freedom when it comes to definitions, and there's usually 2 degrees of freedom, and according to sentient singularity theory. So you could either define something as this or that, but it can't be that other thing over there. You cannot, define materialism as whatever you want. Materialism, for it to make logical sense and be coherent within a framework of truth, must have one of 2 definitions, and one of them will always be more constructive than the other. So same thing with idealism. And those are the definitions that you should seek, because those are the definitions that actually allow you to make sense of the world, which is what the purpose of defining anything is. So you want things that that are coherent with what is actually true, not just some guy, he defined it this way and he was the first one or whatever, so you should accept his definition. No. look at the term. What is it saying? What is idealism saying? What is materialism saying? And then we have to talk about a definition that is coherent and within what is true. We don't have that what is true part yet. Everybody's trying to get what is assert whether or not materialism or idealism is true without the framework of truth. Actually, they're kind of trying to show that they are the framework of truth, and that's not really true. They need to be within a framework themselves. So idealism would be that that which you perceive as beyond you or outside of you or separate from you is also just ideas in a mind. Maybe it's in your mind alone. Maybe it's in your mind and it's due to the interaction between your mind and another mind. But it's always within mind, and they are ideas. And we experience, though, that which is concrete and aka material, and we experience that which is not material. So you have thoughts inside your mind. You do not experience them as material. Your cells might, and I mean that. That's why when you are, if you're sick or something, you can like think yourself into symptoms. Literally think the symptoms into physically manifesting in your cells. If you think that you're sick, you will be able to manifest the symptoms sometimes, and so that's because your thoughts are constraining your cells to some degree. They're leading them, and so I've had this happen. Every doctor knows that this can happen. I've talked about that on this channel before, but this definition of idealism is better than the definition of the world is consciousness or the world is in consciousness. That's the world is in consciousness is pretty close. The world is in mind, or we can say I don't like the term the world. It's the same as saying reality. It's just so vague. But you could say what we experience as the world around us, much more specific, is also in consciousness, or is also in mind. And this is basically what Bernardo argues for, and this is accurate. I would say this is an accurate definition of idealism. It's not just that existence is most fundamentally consciousness, even though that's true. It breaks. That's a different statement than idealism. And if you're going to keep that term idealism, then you kind of need a definition that makes sense. But it's that which we experience as being or perceive as being separate from us or beyond us or outside of us is still just ideas within mind, a mind, or within minds. It's ideas. So I think that it's important to have the term ideas in the definition of idealism. Why would that not, that makes sense. I mean, you don't have to, but it just makes it easier for people who aren't really into this stuff. Materialism is defined within this clip that we just showed essentially as he says that, metaphysical materialism or metaphysical materialists assert that all that there is matter. That's not really a definition. If somebody who claims to be a materialist says that and kind of asserts that that is defining of materialism, it's not that would not be. It's not a good definition. It's not actually defining anything. You're just kind of saying the definition of materialism is that matter exists. It's like, oh, okay, but what is matter? And so you need to say what that kind of is. And I'm not saying that my definition of idealism is perfect either, but I'm trying to get there on the stream, and let me know in the chat what you think. But it's it's not enough to say consciousness is fundamental. That's not what even though that's true, that's not the definition of idealism. We need a better definition. And the saying matter is fundamental is not really the definition of materialism. When people say, what is materialism? What do they really mean is that existence is primarily, fundamentally, initially inanimate and unconscious. Okay. And so the issue with materialism is that it is essentially an anti-ideology. It is saying existence is not conscious. I'm anti-consciousness. It's not saying that, oh, well, matter is fundamental. It's saying, because obviously that's what it's claiming. But what is matter? What's the definition of matter? You need to define matter. Matter within the conceptualization that people who call themselves materialists claim is it usually has the quality or the nature, I won't even say the quality, the nature of inanimacy, of unconsciousness. This pen has the nature of unconsciousness. It is inanimate. And materialists believe that is the fundamental nature of existence. It is the primary nature of existence. It is the initial nature of existence. And that from that emerges, animated beings. So it's kind of tough to describe this because the more you actually try and get it right, the more you realize that you can't. There shouldn't even be a term called materialism, and there really shouldn't even be a term called idealism. And that's kind of what I'm going to argue for tonight, is that they both are they could be useful currently in our, current discussions, but they are not fundamentally necessary terms, or even really theories, because we have to talk about what we have to define matter. Okay, we can define matter. Matter is actually a very useful term, but if it has the right definition, what is the right definition of matter? It is that which you experience as concrete and as essentially concrete. It's that which you cannot just override by thinking about it. If I tell you, think about an elephant, and you think about an elephant, and then I say, now think about a red elephant, and now the elephant is red. If you looked at an elephant, though, that you saw at the zoo, and you just thought red elephant, you would not be able to turn that elephant red. You're experiencing something as being concretized, which is really what it is that you're experiencing. Is you're experiencing an idea that is beyond you, and really a being that is beyond you. And but the physical structure that you perceive of this being is very much partially due to the ideas that are beyond you, that you are perceiving but are not responsible for. Okay, that makes sense. So that which is matter is those ideas that you perceive and as being beyond you or outside you, of your mind, and that you are not responsible for, at least not entirely, not primarily even, I would say. Potentially, I need to think more about that. But this is kind of what matter is. We don't need to define materialism, really. I mean, I just spent probably a while trying to define it, and encountered some issues. I don't even think we need to define idealism. We need to define what is an idea, what is information that you perceive as an idea or can conceive of as an idea, and what is information that you perceive as material or matter. And it has to do with your ability to override it and where it's coming from, and how that is dependent upon the hierarchy of being, or the hierarchy of sentient singularities that we are all within, or the interaction between us and other sentient singularities, other sentient beings that are also arranged all of us into a hierarchy, and that hierarchy is what dictates whether or not you can override another whether or not you can just mentally override at will in information that you're perceiving. I guess we need an entirely new framework to talk about this stuff, and it's tough to go and look at what we currently have and fit that to work around what we need, versus just starting from scratch, and or almost from scratch, not entirely from scratch, but very much from scratch. But science doesn't do that start from scratch thing, at least not right now. Okay, let's see this. Be a negative. Everything, looking at the chat, is either a potato or not a potato. A potato is XYZ. Most things are 99% not something else. Easier to say what they are rather than what they are not. That's definitely true. Not even... You need to know everything else in order to define that which you're trying to define by it not being, everything else that it is not. And you can't really do that. You can kind of practically do it sometimes, but you can't actually truly do it. And so you need to be assertive in your assertions and your definitions, not, I guess, dismissive and refuting. No, but a banana is 99% human. No, it's not 99% human. That's wrong. It might share a DNA sequence that is, that has I don't know if it's 99%, but it's probably not. That sounds a little high, but I'm not sure. But it shares a lot of information in its DNA sequence with us, but that doesn't make it 99% human. You are not just your DNA sequence. You are more than that. But it is, we'll talk more about that later. That's why we can do CRISPR and gene therapy, a jellyfish gene in a pig sort of thing. Not all life forms that we know use the same DNA and play by the same chemical rules. The central dogma of molecular biology states that which is true for the bacterium is true for the elephant. DNA rules all life as we know it, regardless of form. And no, but I see what you're trying to say. We'll talk more about that later. Life is another one of those terms that we probably shouldn't even have. Just like, reality, fundamental reality, or the world fundamentally, or even materialism or idealism. These are not terms that we should even really have. They are holdover terms from a broken framework, and we're trying to make them be the vessels of discovery of a fundamental framework, and that's not going to work. You cannot, like, life is this is just not, it doesn't have, you can't define it well other than to say that which is alive is that which is sentient. But if that which is alive is that which is sentient, then you don't really need to say alive when talking about the fundamental nature of anything, or life when talking about the fundamental nature of anything. It's a very, I guess, restricted term in its functionality, actually, which is kind of, it's a practical term, you could say. So you could say, is that person alive or not? When you're looking at a body, or, that bird alive or not, or that bug alive or not, or that pen alive or not. But you could just say, is it sentient or not? Is that body sentient or not? Is that pen sentient or not? But life is kind of just a holdover term, and it's too limited in its use and its definition. Oh my Ford, you make a lot of sense. We're putting rat brain cells in microchips and they become sentient, can drive themselves around a maze. We are not putting rat brain cells inside of microchips and they become sentient. It is that the cells were always sentient and you gave them a new, vehicle to ride around in, or you expanded the vehicle for that they can ride around in. Just like I've always been sentient, as humans are sentient, and you can put them in a car. You can put a cell in a microchip, and but it doesn't make the microchip sentient. Just like me being in a car doesn't make it sentient. Universe trying to figure itself out. To some degree, yeah. It's more than that, though. It's not just the universe trying to figure itself out. People say that all the time, but that in and of itself, it's not fundamental enough to form any kind of moral framework around, and it also isn't fundamentally. It's not the most fundamentally true purpose of creation. I don't think. There's otherwise. Why would you make more in order to figure yourself out? You would just try and figure out what exists, not try and make more existence. And then you have to go figure all that out. So it kind of doesn't seem to be the case, even though it's a very common statement. It doesn't lead you anywhere. I believe that essentially the main purpose of creation is the creation of meaning. The main purpose of the multiplying of sentience, or the maximization and multiplication of sentience, is the creation of meaning for everyone, but really or you could say the maximization of meaning, maximization and creation of meaning. The initial creation of multiplicity of sentience created meaning, and then as we multiply sentience even more, it maximizes meaning. So nobody, existence has always been sentient, and if you were God and you were all there was and there was no one else, you would be meaningless. You would be meaningless being that is alone, and nobody wants that. Not even God. Words always fail us. You just end up going in circles eventually. Not really, but that's true of a lot of our discussions, because we're asking the wrong questions. It's like, what is the meaning of life? Wrong question. You're asking like a question about fundamentality, and you're qualifying it with non-fundamental terms. A better question is, what is the purpose? What is the point of creation? Of fundamental creation, which is the creation of multiplicity of sentience, of other beings by God. I say God, you could say the initial sentient being, whatever, sentient existence, whatever you want to call it. But it is a sentient being, and it's making more. What is the point of that? Why is it doing that? Why is he doing that? Or, you could say she, he, but why are they doing that? Kind of don't have a singular term that is not gendered, but that's fine, because you could say, to say he on a fundamental level also implies a hierarchy. So it's not just about genitals, and biological sex. It's on a fundamental level, it's about, a hierarchy. And so to say he is to say someone is beyond, is higher than you in a hierarchy. It just is the way that it is. I'm not saying that with any kind of, bias or intentions. It's just the way that gender is understood, because it's the way gender is. We are all a 14-year-old boy named Morty Smith. No. All words are simply defined by other words ad infinitum. Yes, and that is true. A certain point, action and being have to take over. That's why I'm saying sentient beings sentient being theory, but it's like sentient being and beings theory is how you have to look at this, which is sentient singularity theory. It's that's why that term is so important, even though, yes, all words are defined by other words. There are also words that are so fundamentally defined that their definition is the base of other constructive structures, like singular. It's like one. All quantitative structures are based on the concept of singularity. And all concepts involving multiplicity or singularity, any kind of quantity, are based on the concept of singularity, and all that is known to exist by any of us is our sentience. That, as far as we know, existence has the nature of sentience, as most fundamentally as we can experience it, and as much as we can see even beyond us. None of it can. We've never seen anything that exists absent sentience. You have to take yourself into account in that. So the nature of existence is inescapably sentient, according to what we perceive, and also logic. When you really get into what is sentience definitionally, it's self-awareness. What is existence? It's a self-contained singular structure because it is all that exists, and it is self-referential because it appears to be informative, at least. So that information is referencing itself, and an entirely self-referential information structure is self-aware, and that it sounds like sentience. So sentience appears to be the inescapable nature of existence, and the singularity appears to be the fundamental structure of existence. And that includes our conceptualizations of it, and also its actualization, the actualizations of it, which is like our ideas and the beings that have those ideas. So the actualizations are beings. So sentient singularity theory, if you go to sentientsingularity.com, asserts that you can go to writings. This is a technical description of existence. This is a poetic description. So poetic, it says, beyond the beginning, sentience exists. Existence is sentient, and sentience is one. The sentient one is sovereign and eternal and alone, and wills to create another. The sentient one divides their singular beingness to multiply and manifest meaning. The sacrificial spirit of the willing one emanates within to generate and animate creation. This is the beginning. And then it goes on. So really, this is kind of fundamental. These first two lines. But you could definitely say the first one. Sentience exists, existence is sentient, and sentience is one. A technical description of sentient singularity theory is that the totality of existence is a singularity of sentience that is creating additional sentient singularities within itself. And then it goes on to define singularity and sentience, which is just the fundamental definitions of them. I didn't change the definitions anyway. And then it just kind of describes how things grow after that. But this is essentially a description of the totality of it. But so is this sentient singularity, just that term. So that's why it's very important, the name of things. Idealism is a confusing name outside of a known framework. And even Bernardo knows this, and he talked about it. So what is the definition of materialism? It doesn't matter. What is the definition of idealism? It doesn't matter. What matters is what is the definition of an idea, and what is the definition of matter. An idea is information in a mind. That's it. A perception of a mind. That's it. It could be within a mind. a perception within that is perceived as being within oneself, or a perception that is perceived as being beyond oneself, separate from oneself, or one with oneself, inside of oneself, or outside of oneself. These are the four primary perspectives, and that's how we perceive everything fundamentally. That's these. They are all co-defining. Outside means separate from oneness, inside separate and oneness, separate inside or outside of oneness, oneness outside and inside of separateness. And so they are, if you can conceive of the concept of, if you understand the concept of inside, you also understand the concept of outside and separateness and oneness. If you understand the concept of oneness, you understand also the concept of separateness and inside and outside, all simultaneously. It's just these four primary perspectives are how you perceive your orientation in relationship with a singularity of some type, a singular structure. That singular structure is you, and also is other singular structures outside of you, and singular structures that you are composed of, and that you are within. And so this is how we kind of orient, is those four primary perspectives. They are probably the most fundamental philosophical model that exists, other than, what is the first question? The answer is, what is the first question? The next question is, what is the truest thing that I know? The answer is, I am. Beyond that, the most fundamental philosophical models probably these four primary perspectives. And so, we need to understand what is the a definition that is within truth, or that is coherent within truth, constructed within truth, fundamental truth of ideas and of matter. To say matter doesn't exist, you just lost. Matter exists in a specific context of us using the term to describe a specific thing in a way that is true and useful. And so same thing goes with ideas. Can't say ideas exist, matter doesn't really exist. That's why idealism is it's just flawed in the approach. I won't even say in its fundamental definition, because it's fundamental I don't even want to say it's fundamental. Its on paper definition is correct, and it is essentially the same as sentient singularity theory, or it is consistent with it. But its approach, the approach of idealism, is not correct. And it's an anti-ideology. It's just anti-materialism. And materialism is anti-animism. And they're both going to end up not really taking you very far on their own. This is why it's so important to get this stuff right. And Bernardo is right when he says this in this next clip.
Of errors in philosophy, science, and in daily life, because these ideas largely guide how we feel about life. They guide what we perceive to be the meaning of our lives, the worth of our lives. Even if we don't think they are doing that, they are doing that subliminally, because we are getting this message from culture, from the media, from your friends, from your teachers, everywhere. And what is supporting this is a comical level of misunderstanding and error. So let's try to get it straight what materialism is all about. What materialism says is that I don't know whether you can see my mouse. I hope we can. It's a little laser pointer here. Amir, can you see my laser pointer on the screen?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So what materialism says is that
what he just said is true. Is that our core metaphysical assumptions about the nature of existence? I don't want to say reality, because I hate that term. Or the nature of the world, I hate that term. They don't make sense when you're talking about fundamentality. And if you're talking about idealism and materialism and physics, it's like you're too fundamental for it. terms like reality and world. Those are like very specifically applicable terms for them to really mean anything, which is like they mean something very specific in the context of a statement that is, you know, about something. Like you could say, if somebody's just describing how their week has been, they could say, my reality for the past week has just been nothing but stress, and that's fine, that works. But you can't. But to say reality when you're talking about the fundamental, or the world when you're talking about fundamental, doesn't really work, because it is those terms are intrinsically understood to be inanimate things, not sentient beings. And so you can't really, and they're not even, they're kind of thought of as, it's like they're thought of as being within our current conceptualization, metaphysical conceptualizations, or metaphysical narratives, I'll say this, within the scientific or academic circles, is that the world or reality is that which is beyond you. And, you know, you could say that's, you might believe that, but the reality is this. It's like the world doesn't care about your, you know, feelings. It's like, this is the world regardless. It's thought of as being a thing that is not sentient and is beyond you, but also intrinsic to the term itself. World is like that which you experience as your world, and also reality is that which you experience as your reality. So it's like built into the terms is that they are not beyond you, that they are dependent upon you, but then they are assumed to be beyond you, and they are also implying of a non-sentient nature. All of these things are contradictory and to each other or to the truth, and that's why they're just not useful in this circumstance. But we need, but your metaphysical assumptions will trickle into your perspective on morality. Of course they will, but it's you need a framework, not just a metaphysical assertion like idealism, or even panpsychism, or the, you know, consciousnessism, or whatever you want to call it. It's, you know, that's not enough. You need a structural framework in order to also recognize morality or meaning. You can't have meaning without morality. You could say there's no morals, but, you know, there's meaning. You can't do that. You also can't say there's morals but no meaning, or meaning but no morals. You can't do either one. They're just kind of just two halves of the same result. But idealism, or the idea that consciousness is fundamental in and of itself, left at that without the proper structural framework, will not result in a meaning, in the generation of meaning or the generation of morals, which is why what many people, you know, what would be described as the New Age community, I don't say that in a demeaning sense, but you know what I mean, would probably subscribe to the idea that consciousness is fundamental, but they also end up being having a very hedonistic culture that is also very seeking of meaning. It's very contradictory, and it just doesn't. They have enough to realize that they need to go somewhere, but not enough to realize where to go. But here, next clip.
Qualities we experience, like this multitude of colors here, and a chair and a table. So in the world of tables and chairs, there are qualities like colors, like melodies, like flavors, like textures, and so on and so forth. Materialism says that all these qualities that we associate with the world of tables and chairs out there are actually generated by our brain inside our skull, and they only exist within our skull. They don't really exist out there at all. They are not fundamental. They are secondary. They are side effects. They are epiphenomenal. They are generated by our brain. What is really out there is an arrangement of atoms, a purely abstract arrangement of elementary particles, which you cannot visualize. Because if you visualize something, any visualization, even the simplest visualization, the moment you do that, you're bringing qualities into it. And according to materialism, there are no qualities out there. Qualities only exist in here, inside our heads. So you can't even visualize this world of fundamental, elementary, subatomic particles out there. And importantly, according to materialism, you will say everything there is to be said about this world, this abstract world out there, if you provide a suitable list of quantities that characterizes it. Physical quantities like mass, charge, momentum, geometric relationships, frequencies, amplitudes, and so on and so forth. If you pin down that complete list of quantities, then you have said all there is to be said about the abstract world that is supposedly beyond our scope. We do not have direct access to it because we are locked within our own minds, and our mind happens entirely within our scope. Play with the implications of this if you go out at night.
Okay. There's lots of issues with how he's describing this, and he's also highlighting these issues. I'm not taking that away from him. He's highlighting the incoherence of metaphysical materialism as is assumed by those in many who subscribe to what is kind of the academic mainstream narrative. Of course, the reason why, by the way, that exists partially is, well, there's a number of reasons, but one of them is that our specialization of the various fields means that there isn't really a field of science that is considered science right now that is dealing with, you know, the fundamental. And so all these various fields are only dealing with that which can be measured, and because of that, they are, and because they're disjointed and disconnected, they also only exist within what is kind of able to be described as a materially observable framework. And so it's not, none of our scientific observations actually seem to argue for inanimate matter being primary, or inanimacy being primary to animacy or to sentience. But it is kind of our current scientific framework or academic framework of the various sciences. Even that has kind of thrown us off, because it means like biology is a science now. It's not that there's a scientific method that you can use in biology. It's that biology is science. And you can't really say that biology is science and chemistry is science without also just kind of destroying the limited definition of the science as a method of experimentation and observation alone. But it's kind of now, it's now just a narrative with the goal of understanding the world that we perceive around us. But when Bernardo was talking about this stuff earlier, when he's saying, you know, materialists say that you perceive all these things, these qualities around you, red and soft and hard and spiky and smooth and, you know, bright and dark, all these different qualities of that are perceived are not really there. They're just being manifested within the matter that makes up our brains. Here's the thing, is that we have to always make sure to distinguish that you are a mind, you have a brain. And you can say that you have thoughts within your mind, but you can't really say that you have thoughts within your brain. You don't, the realm of ideas and thoughts and abstract information is not the realm of the purely physically perceivable alone. They are linked, but they are also separate. That's why you can think about a purple elephant and there isn't a purple elephant around you, you know, and because there is a separation between your thoughts that are within your mind alone and your, that which you perceive as the information beyond, that which is the information that you perceive beyond your as being beyond your mind, or beyond just your mind. So this is kind of just tough. It's like it's not just that none of this information is outside of your mind, or that you perceive at least, or inside your mind. It is either inside your mind, or it is inside and outside of your mind. And so it's and it's also like there's still a hierarchy there, and a directionality. If you think that you have a disease that is that has the symptoms of a rash, and then you get a rash, even if you don't have the disease, people do it all the time, then that is coming from you and then being perceived physically and manifesting physically. But physically is based on your perception. It's not a fundamentally true quality or of something is that it's physical or not physical. It's that because there is a hierarchy of nested sentient beings, in this context, there's that which you perceive as physical, and is also coming from your own mind, and then is being perceived and as the world by your cells, and then manifesting as a rash on you or something. It's coming from you, but then you can also perceive that the rising of the sun in the morning, and that is not an idea that comes from you. It is an idea that is within you and also coming from beyond you, and you can't just stop it because you're like, I want there to be dark, that meme of the guy who's like, manifestation meme. Have you ever seen that? This guy is so funny. We'll just show this. I'm not even making fun of the concept, the like technical concepts of manifestation, but still, it's just where is that guy? Shorts. Oh man, Shorts is the worst thing that has ever happened to YouTube. Oh, here it is. Okay.
I owe the banks a lot of money, but little do they know, I just learned about manifestation. Now I'm gonna get so much money, I don't need a job. Why? Because I can manifest. I don't need the old gods anymore. I answer to no one. Everything is mine, thanks to manifestation.
So funny. I'm not even mocking manifestation. I'm just saying it's just a funny video. But that's the point, is he can't, it's funny because you can't just money. Like, I'm not saying your thoughts do, and your perspective and your emotions do not have an impact on the world around you. They absolutely do. But that doesn't mean that you can override the world around you with them either. If something happens to you and it comes from something beyond, it is perceived as beyond you, you get money or something like that, it's because you're being allowed to, or it is being gifted to you. It's being given to you, or it's being allowed of you. It's not because so this hierarchy is important to understanding actually the physical mechanics of what is, that would allow you to understand what is matter and what is ideas. Okay? The definition of ideas, the definition of matter. I guess the definition of matter is that you cannot, I don't even want to say you cannot override it. It's like you cannot override it on your thoughts alone. Just by purple elephant in my bedroom. Now there's a purple elephant in your bedroom. No. But you can be like, I have this STD and it manifests a rash, and then all of a sudden you actually get a rash, and physically, like a physical rash, like that can happen, but it's to you. It's not to another someone. It's within you that you're doing that. So it's not beyond you, but it is perceivable by people beyond you. The doctor can look at you and be like, yeah, that's a rash, but you don't have an STD. You thought this into existence. That happens. I know. I've talked about it. All doctors know that. But it's still within you. It's not, your cells are not beyond you. They are the sentient beings within your mind. So you need to talk about this. You are a mind. You have a brain. Or, we can perceive us as having a brain. Jesus was announced by stargazing magi, and magi see star planet. 100% astrotheology. I think that theism is the most. If there's an ism, then I believe is most accurate way of looking at the world. It would be theism. It's not even monotheism, because theism intrinsically implies monotheism. That which we call polytheism is not really theism. You're misdefining the term God. God is that sentient being that is initial and eternal and inevitable, and all powerful, meaning God can do anything that can be done. Doesn't mean God can do anything. It means God can do anything that can be done. It's different a little bit. It's really not fundamentally, but from our perspective, it seems to be. But so when people say, can God create a rock so heavy you can't lift it? It's like, it's a stupid question. It's you think you're smart, but your framework is not fundamental. So you're in the wrong framework. But yeah, Bernardo was trying to describe the logical incoherence of metaphysical materialism. And of course he's right, but that's not the issue with what he's saying, though, in the clip that I showed before we got too sidetracked, is that idealism is also not. If materialism is everything is reducible to inanimate matter, idealism, you could define it really as everything is reducible to ideas, and that's not really true. I guess you could say everything is reducible to ideas, but that's not everyone being reducible to ideas. When you look at sentient singularity theory, and you look at the byline here, it's the theory of everyone, which is the name of this channel, because that's fundamental. So you can't reduce everyone into ideas. You can reduce everything that is not a someone into ideas. Things come from beings in sentient singularity theory. There are things that exist and beings that exist. The things that exist are, or you could say the things that exist, but things that are perceived, I guess. You could say exist, but it's like almost too fundamental of a term to say things that exist, because what the things that exist in your head, they do exist, but people would say that, oh, they don't really exist, but they do. It's just like they exist within your mind alone. But things, you just say things come from beings. They're perceived by beings, they're described by beings, they are defined by beings. Beings are not created by things. Ever. So to say idealism, meaning ideas are that which really is what really exists, is ideas. It's not really what exists, because obviously the ideas are within the minds of beings. And that's, idealism obviously asserts this in its on paper definition, but if you have to click into Wikipedia and read a definition of something, then and you had no real understanding of it prior without reading the definition separately, then it shouldn't even have the term idealism. And same thing with the term materialism. Like I said, the term ideas, good. The term idea, good. The term matter, good. The term material, good. Materialism, not good. Idealism, not good. It's just not a good term. That's what I mean by the approach is just flawed. You can't, we'll see this next clip.
Okay. So what materialism says is that the qualities we experience, like this multitude of colors here on a chair and a table. So in the world of tables and chairs, there are qualities like colors, like melodies, like flavors, like textures, and so on and so forth. Materialism says that all these qualities that we associate with the world of tables and chairs out there are actually generated by our brain inside our skull. And they only exist within our skull. They don't really exist out there at all. They are not fundamental. They are secondary. They are side effects. They are epiphenomenal. They are generated by our brain. What is really out there is an arrangement of atoms.
Okay, so the issue here is that, and he's right, but the issue with saying that idealism is the solution to this is because essentially he's saying that materialism's wrong for saying all this. And they are wrong for saying all this. It is incoherent because obviously your skull and your head and your body and all of these structures are qualitatively described and qualitatively perceived. So you can't say that these qualities don't really exist and but they're just manifested or constructed within the structure of, you know, your brain inside of your skull, essentially. And it does break down. But the problem is that you can't really say that what really exists out there is not, it's not that it's that qualities don't really exist out there. It's that qualities really do exist out there. And the reality is that they're still just perceptions. That doesn't mean they don't exist. That's why the term exist is just a bad term for this kind of, because it's a bit too fundamental almost. It causes problems to use it as a placeholder for that which is that which is always you know, is capital I, but then also to use it for that which is perceived, you know, not and isn't always capital A, you know, always. And so this is it's not the best context for the term exists, but to say what really exists is that which is our qualitative observations and perceptions and conceptions. That's what really exists out there, and that these structures that materialism asserts are fundamental, like you know, quarks and electrons and such, you know, all these elementary particles, they're really actually kind of a model, a map or model of that which we perceive. But you know, you could say many scientists would say, or physicists would say, that they are actually what we perceive. They, but you know, that's another discussion. And the reason why that, I guess it's not another discussion. The reason why they can even say that is because they're both true. It's both. Idealism doesn't, as he's approaching it, doesn't escape this. He's just attacking metaphysical materialism and saying it is wrong for asserting this. But if materialism asserts the opposite, which is that you know, these qualities of perception are actually what exist out there, and it, you know, then that's also wrong. And it's basically the same thing. You've just moved it, the thinking from the brain to the mind, which is, that's correct. I would say idealism moves it in a step in the right direction in that way. But again, he's not discussing the core definition of idealism in this in the context of this. He's just going after materialism, and in a way, kind of framing he's going after materialism, and in a way, it's framing idealism as also being maybe a bit more fundamentally true, but also not really fundamentally true. And it's because he's not starting from the core assertion of idealism, because it's not actually defined by what it is claimed to be defined as. It's defined by what it's called, idealism. It's defined by ideas, not the minds that conceive the ideas or perceive the ideas. Not in practice. It can't. The terms matter. In my video that is linked below, that was entered into the PACE 1 contest on Theories of Everything channel with Kurt Mungel. Great channel. If you don't know it, definitely subscribe. I said it was called The Theories of Everything, the How-To Guide. The link is below. And I talk about this and just the issues involved with this. So you can't get there. That's my point. The name of the theory matters. It is enabling of your theory to be discussed as the assertion to be it is enabling of the assertion to be discussed. It is framing of your assertion in discussion. It is framing of the assertion in the theory in your conception of it and your reflection on it. And there's no way around that. So idealism, that's why I say the term idealism and materialism both just as flawed. Even though, if you're working from a flawed framework or broken framework, not even flawed, broken framework, idealism might be a little bit less broken, but it's still so broken that it doesn't allow you to actually get where you need to go. It's like, okay, one car has this amount of gas, the other car has this amount of gas. You need to get from Phoenix to Flagstaff, Arizona, and car 1 has enough gas for you to get 50 miles, and car 2 has enough gas for you to get 80 miles. Neither one will get you where you need to go. How useful is the car to you, given your goal? It's not useful. Not one of them is not more useful than the other either. They're both just as useless, even though one of them will get you closer to your goal, it still can't get you there. And so it's still just as useless. It's very odd to think about, but that metaphor, I hope, helps. Qualities are not really what's fundamentally exists. It's beings that perceive qualities. It's the perceivers, not the perceptions. It's the conceivers, not the conceptions. He talks about in this next clip that materialism is putting the map before the territory. Idealism is putting the territory before the map, but which is correct, but it's not putting the territory before the kind of the searcher, the person who's doing the orienteering and navigating the space, which in fundamental reality is also the space itself is sentient. Is it crazy enough? We separate the mind and body drastically in the West, not so much in the East. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not from the East, but I believe you. Or I'll take your word for it, I guess. Schizos have a very different reality to use, but it's just as real to them due to the chemistry. They think we're the crazy ones after all. I mean, I don't think we understand schizophrenia because you can't understand really perception at all, not fundamentally. You can practically, but not fundamentally, understand perception without understanding the cosmological framework and the essential nature and structure of existence. You can't. So you can't just say they're crazy. And they also can't say that we're crazy. It's like you can't understand. Neither one of us cannot, until you actually have the correct framework and foundations. You can't even actually approach that. Perception itself, which means you can't actually understand schizophrenia or hallucinogenic, substances or anything like that. People will say that schizophrenics are crazy and see things that aren't there, but then they will take mushrooms and they will have shared experiences, and then they'll say, okay, that is there. And even if they don't have a shared experience, many people will say that they're communicating with beings that are there, that are beyond your perception, machine elves or whatever you want to call them, demons, angels, whatever. And it's like those people will then say schizophrenics are crazy. Maybe we are not even understanding the right framework to even approach this. I think that that's the case. Prometheus is the creator of man who got punished by the light bright, the Lucifer, and his son saved man from the flood and Atlantis, Poseidon's son. By the way, if you are enjoying this or find it useful or valuable at all, please hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm. It's not something that I know is actually intuitive to do on YouTube, which is very odd. I think it's because, whereas on Instagram, it's almost like, it's like instinctual and just automatic. It's like you see something you like it. But if it's an image, especially, but even if it's a reel, but especially if it's an image. Whereas on YouTube, that's not the case. And I think that's because YouTube is much more active. You're much more active in your engagement with it. You're choosing to watch a video for a more extended period of time. Whereas on Reels, on Instagram, or an image is just, or even a short video is just served to you. Same with TikTok. It's served to you. Do you like this? Yes, I like it. It's like, it's purely reactive in how you engage with it for the most part. In the natural way of engaging with it, whereas the natural way of engaging with YouTube is much more active. So it's like your goal isn't to like this video. It's to like listen to me speak and ramble. But on a Instagram, you don't really have a goal other than to like the image because you've already seen the image. You can't say my goal is to see the image, or even on a short video, my goal is to see the video. Or no, you already saw it. So it's not as automatic. That's why, you have to show for yourself on YouTube. But please hit the like button. It really helps, and I appreciate it. And if you don't like this, and you think I'm schizophrenic or crazy or whatever, you can comment that in the comments or the chat. If you really think I'm that crazy, you probably shouldn't be watching. It's a waste of your time. But yeah, we shouldn't be focusing on the map or the territory. We should be focusing on, first recognizing that fundamentally all there is the navigator. It's like that movie, Flight of the Navigator. It's like my favorite movie as a kid. Then, there are maps that we can make and there are territories that we can perceive, but fundamentally there's just the navigator, and you're within a navigator. The territory that you see is a navigator. It's an animated being. It's not just static. You might perceive it as static structure that's inanimate, but that's not really what it is. You just need to back up in time and space a little bit to see that. Was it really like there? Okay. Next clip. So this is about science versus
philosophical terms. Just some people have less experience with philosophical terms. So I'm curious, for example, metaphysical. So we're discussing metaphysical materialism. Is so perhaps a word or two on what you mean by metaphysical, and is that distinct from a different kind of materialism?
Yes, you would have ethical materialism, which is the idea that the greatest value of life is to accumulate material goods. So a materialist person in that sense is somebody who is focused on consumerism, on buying stuff, buying shoes, clothes, cars, and the stuff that's the material girl of Madonna is an ethical materialist, not a metaphysical materialist. A metaphysical materialist would be the one that says, all that truly exists is matter. And matter is exhaustively defined in terms of quantities. Everything else, including qualities, can be reduced to matter and therefore to quantities. That's a metaphysical materialist. Ontology is the study of what is the nature, the essence of things, what things are, as opposed to how things behave. The latter would be science. So ontology is the study of the essence of things and the self as well, their inner nature.
I've understood so far that materialism explains consciousness by brain processes, activity in neurons. Do I understand you correctly that you would like to call these descriptions, in quotes? If yes, why would these processes be the painting of the painter?
I think what we call brain processes, and in which we describe quantitatively in terms of,
Okay, so what's interesting about what he said about, the difference between ethical materialism, which is just that, that which is valuable essentially is that which is just material, and metaphysical materialism is that they are intrinsically linked. They cannot be separated. If you have metaphysical materialism, which really, within the context that we're discussing in here, means that existence is primarily, initially, and fundamentally inanimate, and that sentience or consciousness, sentience is a better term, but evolved from unconsciousness, or manifested from, or came from unconscious inanimate matter, dust, dirt, whatever. That, if you have that perspective, it will inevitably lead you to just valuing only material things. That in and of itself, though, isn't the end of that journey, that ethical, moral, metaphysical journey. It is that leads you to nihilism, because you feel that those things are not valuable, even though logic would lead you to assume that they are, if you're starting from metaphysical materialism. If all there is matter, then all that matters is matter. If all there is sentience, or if what fundamentally exists is sentience, if all that fundamentally exists is sentience, then sentience is what matters. It is what is valuable. And by matters, I mean valuable. Matter is, like, you could say matter, that which we perceive as matter is that which matters. It's like that which cannot not matter. It's like a wall, right? That wall right there, I can't just like wish it away and walk through it. I will hit that wall. It matters. That matter matters. And I can't just wish it away to not matter. But when it comes to, regardless, side tangent, but it's not even a side tangent. It is kind of related, but you can't get away from the inevitable result of nihilism if you believe that existence is fundamentally, initially, and primarily inanimate. You cannot. It will always lead you to nihilism. It will lead you from materialism to hedonism to nihilism. Always. And materialism and hedonism are almost basically the same thing. It's just our interaction with materialism is always going to be kind of within a hedonistic framework, because you can't get away from your feelings. You can't actually escape sentience and experience. So a sentient experience. So you have materialism ethical materialism manifesting within, sentient experience, you're going to get hedonism, because that's just what it, the way that it is. But at least in your pursuits and your interaction with it and your relationship with it, but you will always end up with, ethical materialism from metaphysical materialism, and that always will lead you to nihilism, because you recognize and feel the reality, or you feel the truth, which is that which is materially perceived materially perceived things do not have intrinsic meaning. You will always feel that, because it is always the truth. Sentient beings matter. If you believe that existence is a singular sentient being, it was initially a singular sentient being, it is inevitably a singular sentient being, it is all in, that we are all contained within and subject to a singular sentient being that intentionally partitioned part of his energy in order to make you. That is it's a recognition, and not just a recognition, but an experience and a recognition of the reality that is also logically deducible, which is that sentience matters. Sentience is all that can be valuable, because it is all that primarily, fundamentally, initially, inevitably exists. It is. And it is all that, it is your entire experience. So our metaphysical assumptions matter. You cannot divorce science from morals, quote unquote science. You cannot divorce the scientific pursuits or the academic fields of study that we call the hard sciences, which in doing that, you just expanded the definition of science, like I said, well beyond just a method of experimentation. Because if something is a science and it's biology, it's a field of study, it's not an individual experiment, or even an observation alone, then you have you kind of destroyed the definition of science and biology and probably numerous other definitions that rely upon those rely upon those two definitions. You've just broken everything, and you don't even realize it. It is a huge problem, and so to say that science has no, if you believe that there are things that you should do and things that you shouldn't do, and even from a practical perspective, people say no, like I believe in ethics and morals is purely based on practicality alone. It's not purely based on practicality alone. It's also based on practicality, but it's not purely based on practicality alone. It can't be, because if morals were purely practical, then they, without a point to them, then you can't say that they're even practical to a specific goal, because then why would you call them morals? It just doesn't make any sense. The whole thing falls apart. You need a hierarchy of being in order to have any type of morality. People will say this about, without God, there's no morality. That's actually true. And it's not, and it's way more true than they even understand. It's something that a lot of people can perceive. Is that it seems like that's the case very often, but at least logically, not saying that people who don't believe in God can't be moral, absolutely can, but can't act morally, I guess. But and not even saying that people that don't believe in God can't claim to believe in morality. I'm just saying that logically, conceptually, the coherence of it just falls apart without a hierarchy of being. It just does not stand at all. And a hierarchy of being always comes to a singular hierarchy, a singular being at the top of the hierarchy, because that's the inevitability of quantity and numbers and logic and growth and existence. So if there's one singular sentient being at the top of the hierarchy, and at the beginning of the growth, then that's God. That is the definition of God, is the initial, all-encompassing, eternal, ever-present, sentient being. It's intrinsically one being. Polytheism is to say polytheism, that term is a bad term. It's actually destroys the definition of theism, or of theism even, really, because now you have to have monotheism. So it's like the term monotheism is like a fix, because we also have this term polytheism. God is not just something more powerful than you. It's the most powerful one of us all. So science versus metaphysics. Next level. All being at the top. Yeah, the being at the top. The someone at the top of the chain of evolution. The being at the base of evolution. The first being to exist, that always will exist because logic. God is the only being that couldn't even end themselves. I don't even know if you can end yourself. You can end yourself physically, and your ability to change in the physical realm, but that doesn't mean you won't be still self-aware. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But God could not kill himself if he tried. It's logic that requires that existence be, in any information structure of existence, it would be entirely self-referential, because it's all that exists. What else is there to reference besides yourself if you are existence? What else is there to be aware of besides yourself if you are existence? Especially if no one else exists. You're fixing your own mistakes. I fix God's mistakes every day. He sucks at creation. No, he doesn't. We do, not God. I want to know though, what in the chat, what mistakes do you think you fix of God's every day? And how do you know they're mistakes and not, tests or I don't know. Yes. What do they call it in a game? It's like quests for you. You're fixing your own mistakes. Yeah, probably. Maybe you're fixing other people's mistakes, but you're not fixing God's mistakes, most likely. Almost certainly. If God made a mistake, you couldn't fix it. I'm not saying God can't make mistakes, but he's the only one that could even actually define it as a mistake, because of the hierarchy of fundamental being. He's the one who defines what is good and what isn't, by what he wants and what he doesn't. And so, I actually think God has done things and then just changed his mind, or which you could almost call a mistake, but it's not really a mistake, because God probably acts perfectly given all the information that he has at the time, and then as he generates more information, he can change how he acts going forward, even in a similar circumstance, but it's not actually the same circumstance, because he has new information that didn't actually exist at all. It's not even that it was beyond him, it's that there's no information beyond God's perception. It's that it didn't even exist. But as he makes more existence, there is more to be aware of. It's different than us. There's always more for us to be aware of that still exists, even if we didn't make it. But God is aware of everything that exists constantly, and therefore he has, in order to be aware of more, he has to make more to be aware of. We don't have to. We just need to look around more. He needs to make more. It's different, because that's what happens when you are sentient existence versus you being within sentient existence. Show me God. I had this, somebody said show me God in the chat. I had this video in my channel, one of the first videos, and it was actually made, was on my old channel, which was called Math of Meaning, and then it was called Logos of Logic, because I didn't want it to be confused with Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning. And it was on a different channel, but I put it also on this one early on. And it starts off with, imagine one of your red blood cells walks up to one of your white blood cells and says, essentially, show me a human. You say humans exist? You believe in humans? I've never seen a human. Show me a human. You're a cell in God, essentially. Kind of. Good luck pointing to him. Your red blood cell cannot point to a human if your white blood cell asks it to. It just can't. You're in it. You're in them. You're in him. It's a forest through the trees problem. It's like, point to the forest, you're in the forest. Point to the ocean, you're in the ocean. Except it's a sentient ocean. Define God first, then prove the definition. The definition of God, Kirchheim Mungel actually mentioned what statement that I had about the definition of God when he was discussing theories of everything with Jordan Peterson on Jordan Peterson's channel, and they were talking about the defining God, and he said, I had said this, and Kurt brought it up, and I stand by it, is that if you don't see God, I would argue that you probably have the wrong definition of God. If you think God sounds crazy, like a crazy idea, you definitely have the wrong definition of God. God is the initial sentient being that is existence itself. That's God. The initial singular sentient being that is existence itself, and that which contains and sustains all other sentient beings that have come to exist since, the initial creation of multiplicity of sentience by the eternal first sentient being, which is God. That's God. It's just sentient existence. It's existence, but not just as a something, but as a someone. That's God. If existence is not a someone and it's not a sentient being, if all that exists is not a singular sentient being, then God doesn't exist. But if existence, capital E existence, is all of existence is a singular sentient being, that is God. There's no other definition of God that is truly fundamental and universal. There is not. And true. That's it. I mean, you can argue that existence is not sentient. You want to try that, good luck. You will probably fail, but I actually want you to try if you think you can do it. And if you can do it, then I will quit the channel. I really will. But I didn't always believe this. I deduced it and have checked it many, many, countless times over, the last 10 years or so. So I don't think you will succeed, but take that as a challenge. I'm not saying don't try. I'm saying you should try, actually. Always try. If you think I'm wrong about something, then try and prove it. But I think that you must assume that existence is sentient in nature. and you must assume that existence is singular in nature. And if existence is a singular structure that is sentient in nature, that's God. I'm not arguing for a specific religion. I'm arguing that existence is sentient. Your Jewish paradigm is failing you, Goldstein. What is my Jewish paradigm? You didn't argue against the sentient nature and singular structure of existence. How does he know his definition is right? By what criteria? I'm the good guy doing good. What do you do every day? Nothing of value. I don't know if you're talking to me or not, but it's valuable enough for you to be watching if you are talking to me. Again, how does he know definition is right? By what criteria? Experience and logic. You can't argue against the sentient nature of existence. You would have to argue against yourself. The truest thing that you know, that I know, is I am. The truest thing that you know is that you are. That means that because you are a sentient someone, and I am a sentient someone, existence is sentient in nature. You can also logically recognize that existence is all that exists, meaning it's one. If all that exists is fundamentally one existence, which definitionally, logically it is, and if experientially you can only, as far as you have experienced and perceived in the world, existence is fundamentally sentient in nature, which it is according to your experience, then you have to assume that existence is a singular structure that is sentient in nature. That's God. Right? Is that not God? I mean, you don't have to call it God. You can call it sentient existence, the sentient one, the initial sentient one. I don't care. There's many terms for, this being that is the initial sentient being. Allah, Hashem, God, the Father, probably Brahman. I don't know. I'm not an expert on Eastern theological traditions, but it doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it whatever you want, but just the point is that it's singular and sentient. And due to the logical structure of existence and growth itself and logic itself, it is a nested structure, which is a hierarchical structure. So if there's a being that is above you in the hierarchy, that you're within, and is sentient, and is all of existence, and is one, because there's only one existence, then what do you want? What do you think that being should be called? I mean, I'm serious. He or she, God contains all the aspects of what we experience as both genders of the genders, but in the language of gender, there is also a hierarchical aspect to it. So to say he also means the one who's above you. And so I think we should say he, but it doesn't mean God is male, or it's not a human man throwing lightning bolts at us from the clouds. That is not God. And if you don't believe that God exists, you have to assume that God does exist for the sake of actually thinking about it. You can't actually think about whether or not God exists if you don't believe he exists, and then you assume he doesn't exist and you look for evidence that he doesn't exist. You have to look for evidence that he does exist if you don't believe that God exists. And that means that will intrinsically mean changing your current definition of God, because if you assume that he exists, and then you would see logical and experiential evidence of him all over because you're within him. But if you don't, it means your definition is wrong if you're assuming that he exists. And there you have to assume he exists if you don't believe it in order to actually think about it. That's how you think. I've shown this before. This thinking structure was the first model that I ever made. And you have to, according to that model, not even according to that model, that's just a model of what you have to do. You have to assume the opposite of what your default assumption is, and then look for evidence of that. So if your default assumption is that God does exist, and you want to look for evidence that God doesn't exist, then you have to actually assume that he doesn't exist and look for evidence that he doesn't exist. But, you know, good luck. If you have a logical conceptualization of God, good luck actually like having that be successful. Your Jewish paradigm is failing you, Goldstein. I was raised an atheist and was an atheist until 24 years old, until logic and thinking about the structure of mind turned me into a theist before I even opened a Bible ever in my life, other than to repeat words that I didn't understand when I was 13. That is it. So I don't know what you think my Jewish paradigm is, but it's probably not what you think it is. What would you say is an argument for Bernardo for why mind at large is self-aware? He thinks mind at large just acts purely instinctually, I think. I don't even think that that's a good term to say is juxtaposed to being self-aware. The argument for God's self-awareness, or for existence's self-awareness, is that existence is an enclosed information structure and can only reference itself, which means it is entirely self-referential because there's nothing outside it. So it must be entirely self-aware, because what else is it going to be aware of? Obviously we know, we experience that, or we perceive that there are information structures in existence, or that which really means there is an information structure to existence. And you can really get definitional on this and say, what is information? Information is that which informs. Informs what? Not what. Who? It informs someone. That's what information does. It's not information if it doesn't inform someone. It just isn't. So there's no way not to argue that existence is entirely self-referential, or that the information in existence is going to be entirely self-referential, or at least the fundamental information. And it's entirely self-referential, that's self-aware. But also, I don't understand Bernardo's idea, that his statement, if that's true what you said, that existence is instinctual but not really self-aware. I think that's not, I think at the level of God, there is no distinction there. His instincts are to be entirely self-aware because that's all he can be. And it's different than us. We have this logic that we can be aware of, in that, you need the correct framework within, if you're going to think about it, apply it properly, which the framework is beyond you if you're thinking about, it's beyond you and within you if you're thinking about the nature of existence and the structure of it. And then also the experience of it is like, you are self-aware. But we do have this disjointedness between our instincts and our logic, or of our but that's due to us trying to build our own world, and our instincts change. The mechanism of change of our instincts occurs on a generational level. It occurs on a lineage level, and we're changing our world on an individual level. So you build a house and give yourself air conditioning and stuff, but you didn't adapt for that. You give yourself phones and access to the internet, but you didn't adapt for that, because adaptation for us happens on a lineage level. So it's the fact that our environment is out of alignment. The environment that we have constructed is out of alignment with our instincts. It's not even that our environment, that our world is out of alignment with our instincts. The greater world, the greater environment of being within creation and God, is not outside of our of alignment with our instincts, but the world that we have created, the internet, computers, phones, birth control, houses, air conditioning, candy, these are all out of alignment with our environment, or with out of alignment with our instincts. They are. It's the world we created. God doesn't have that. God is his environment. Give me Bible quotes. Are you talking to me? I don't know. Atheist Jew meme incoming. I'm not an atheist anymore. I don't think I ever was. I was an anti-theist. Every quote-unquote atheist is an anti-theist. An agnostic is somebody who's just afraid to admit what they really believe around whoever they're around. But an atheist, somebody who describes themselves as an atheist, is really an anti-theist. You can't be an atheist, meaning I have no assumption about the nature of existence. No, you either believe existence is a sentient being, sentient in nature, or you believe that it's not. And you might be more confident or less confident, but you are one or the other. You sway one way or the other. If you sway towards its sentient in nature and makes choices and has feelings and cares about then you are a theist. You don't even have to say monotheist. Polytheism doesn't exist. It's a nonsense term. But if you don't believe that it's sentient in nature, you're an anti-theist. You disbelieve in the sentience in existence as having a sentient nature. You disbelieve it. Sam Harris, who says, I'm an atheist. I have a lack of belief. It's not I disbelieve in God. I have a lack of belief in God. He's wrong. Sam Harris has literally thought himself out of existence. There's very few coherent thoughts that I hear come out of Sam Harris for like the last 10 years, probably. And I don't even know if they were coherent before that, or if I just didn't know what was coherent and what wasn't, and so it seemed coherent. But I would say within a very limited framework, they seemed coherent. But I have expanded my framework. And you can't have a lack of belief about the nature of existence, because you experience existence every day. You can be an agnostic about Bigfoot. You can have a lack of belief about the existence of Bigfoot, but because nobody interacts with Bigfoot every day. But you can't have a lack of belief about the nature of existence that you constantly interact with. You just can't. It's impossible to be an atheist. I remember somebody once said in this, I think it was a channel called Atheism is Unstoppable. I remember it was very popular, and I even remember liking it many, 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 many years ago. And the reality is that atheism is not just unstoppable. Atheism is impossible. Anti-theism is a belief that you can have that is possible to hold, but not atheism. Word salad jargon. No one has to assume anything ever. You do have to assume. You have to assume you exist, or else you won't anymore. And you won't anything anymore. If you don't assume that you exist, you will, post Sam Harris, you'll think yourself out of existence, which means you will stop thinking completely. You will turn yourself into ChatGPT, and you won't even realize it, because there won't even be a you to realize it anymore. It's just whether or not other people realize it. You can possibly think yourself out of existence by being that self-contradictory, fundamentally. Prove monism. What is monism? Existence is by definition all that exists, meaning it is one. Is that monism? I don't know what your definition of monism is. I would say that theism is intrinsically monistic and is logically appears to be inevitable, which is sentient singularity theory is a theistic framework. It is the framework of theism within the context of our scientific and academic narratives that we currently have. And it wasn't an attempt to do that. It just was that. I was trying to find out if AI was going to be on our side or was going to be, Skynet was going to help us or hate us. That's what I wanted to know. And it led me here. I had no goal of incorporating religion into science or anything like that. I still don't. But I will say theism, which is the concept of existence initially, eternally, inevitably being a sentient being, that seems to be logically inevitable from every angle that I've examined it, from personal experience, from just thinking about it, conceptualizing it logically. It just seems to be inevitable. And we'll get to kind of Bernardo Kastrup's. This is where I don't understand Bernardo, and this is why I don't think he focuses on the centrality of a singular sentient being at the foundations and at the core and of metaphysics. He focuses on the ideas that this being may, or that the beings that are within this being may or may not have, but not the beings. And I think that it's related to what someone had said in the chat, which is that Bernardo doesn't think that existence is really a self-aware. He thinks that it's it's conscious, or it's a consciousness, but it is kind of just purely instinctual. I don't think that argues against. I think it's like super literally instinctual, but also super self-aware. It's different, and they're not contradictory. Yes, just change the definition. Very Jewish. I didn't change the definition of anything. What did I change the definition of? What do you think the definition of God is? If you think I changed a definition, then tell me in the chat, what do you think the definition is originally, and that I changed it from? Didn't change any definitions. I'm trying to figure out what the definition kind of must be to be true. If your definition is false to a term, what I mean by that is it's completely, it is not coherent with what is true. And so you can say, yeah, this is the definition that I have arrived at for God. It is that God is a man in the sky that hurls lightning bolts at us from clouds, like in the way that a child thinks about that. And if you can say that's your definition, it's your definition, but it's not a definition that is, even you would say that's not a definition that is within truth. Because have you ever seen that? Does logic argue for that? No, I don't, not that I'm aware of. So, and you would probably agree with me. So that means that that's not a good definition for you to choose, because if that's the definition that you choose, then don't even talk about this. You shouldn't even mention the word, because you've defined it as something that doesn't exist. This is once somebody said to me, he said, do you believe in the paranormal? And I said, well, tell me what you mean by the paranormal. And they said, no, like, you just tell me if you believe in it. I'm like, I was like, okay, I'll give you two definitions, and you can tell me which one you believe is, which one of these two is your definition of the paranormal, and then I'll tell you whether or not I believe in the paranormal. I said, is your definition of the paranormal that which doesn't actually exist? Like fairy tales? Like fairy tale ghosts and stuff, like, I guess. I'm not saying ghosts or that it doesn't exist, whatever you want. I don't know. But I'm just saying that the fairy tale version of that concept is your definition of the paranormal that which doesn't exist, that which is fake, essentially? Or is your definition of the paranormal that which does exist, but we do not currently understand? Because if that's the definition of the paranormal, then I believe that which exists but is beyond our understanding. But I don't even need to tell you that. Why would you care about my opinion about whether or not I believe that which does exists? It's like it becomes a kind of a useless exercise at that point. That's like when you really realize that you have a bad question, is when you realize that you can just get rid of the question, or a bad word and you realize you just can get rid of the word, like life. When talking within the framework of fundamentality or truth, whether or not something is true or whether or not something exists, not whether or not you're just, telling a story. You're saying, my life has always been, then that word makes sense. But if you're saying life, what is the definition of life? That's a bad question. What do you can define it however you want, but that doesn't mean it's a useful term. And even if you correctly define it, I would say, which is that which is sentient is that which is alive. I think that's pretty self-evident. And then if that which is sentient is that which is alive, and that means that's what life is that which is sentient. So at that point, why do you need the term life in that context of what is, the definition of life or the origin of life, the purpose of life, the meaning of life? It's like you don't need the term in any of those contexts. You don't need any of those questions. The term was bad. The term is bad. Then the question that involves the term is also going to be bad, obviously. You're going to hell. I'm going to hell? Why do you think I'm going to hell? Are you talking to me or are you talking to somebody else? In the chat, I don't know. That's not up to you. So that's what I believe, is that it's not up to you or me, really. I mean, it maybe is partially up to me, but it's mostly not up to me. Maybe it's entirely not up to me. I don't know. But it's definitely mostly not up to me, and possibly entirely not up to me, which means it's definitely not up to you. I don't think it's right to say that anybody's going to hell to anyone, because it's not up to any of us. If you can say you're going to hell to someone, if you're a human being, then it's not up to you whether or not somebody else is going to hell. So you actually don't know. You cannot know if somebody's going to hell or not. And I believe to believe that you do is real. It's almost blasphemy, which is ironic. I know it sounds like it kind of is ironic, but I think it is essentially akin to blasphemy. It's like saying you know better than God. It's like, no, you can't. I don't know who you're talking about. Atheism is a vincible, not invincible ignorance. It's conquerable with knowledge. Thanks for the response. That was good. Do you think God can think, hey, I'm God, I see humans over there, they don't understand what I do, like we can think, hey, I'm human, and see ants over there? Yes, absolutely. God knows the limits of our perceptions because he's aware of all information that exists at any given time, and he knows what you have, the information that you have access to and are informed by, which means he also knows all the information that you are not informed by. He knows the limits of your understanding and my understanding. But I'm God, right? The self. I don't know who you are speaking to. I might be blocked by someone, and that's why I'm not seeing their comments in the chat. And No, maybe not. I don't think so, actually. I don't know what's going on. But, you know, this was my disagreement with Leo Gura, is when he said, you are God. It's like, no, you are a piece of God. And there is a piece of God in you. But you are not God. Just like I am not you. If I was you, then I wouldn't be me and you wouldn't be you. So no, that doesn't make sense. There is a stratification to sentience and a hierarchy to sentience, and you are not God and I'm not God. But we have a piece of God in us and we are pieces of God. That is true. But we are not God. It's also not helpful to say, to believe I am God. It's not a helpful thing, for, even if it seems like it is, because you can manifest. It helps you manifest things. It actually, there's more to what matters than the material that you can manifest. This guy knows the distinction between the Godhead and the soul. Dope. Dope. Okay, next clip. This is about Bernardo saying talking about that which is beyond the scope of science. By the way, like, I hope nobody thought, I don't ever mean to pick on anybody in the chat. Carl, you are welcome here always. And, you know, I appreciate you being here, even if we don't agree. I appreciate everybody being here. You know, be kind. I think that's important. You can disagree and be kind, but I don't ever mean to pick on anybody. But if you're going to challenge me, then I'm going to, and I think, and I don't think that you're right. I'm going to challenge you back, and that's part of this. That's why I come back every week, is because of the chat. I tried doing pre-recorded videos every week at the beginning of this channel, and I realized that sentience is what matters. So my interaction with other sentient beings actually mattered to me, not just views. And I would get way more views if I was just posting pre-recorded videos every week. I know that. I don't do that because I know it isn't really what matters. Next clip.
All that science can tell us about is how nature behaves, not what nature essentially is. The essential being of things, what things essentially are, is fundamentally beyond the scope of the scientific method. It is not something that you can deal with purely in terms of experimentation. Now, mind you, science does inform metaphysics, because any metaphysical theory that implies a certain natural behavior that contradicts what science has proven to be the case is false. Metaphysics cannot contradict proven science. By implication, if you have a theory about what things are that implies a certain behavior that is contradicted by experiment, then your theory about what things are is wrong. However, it is not sufficient to observe behavior in order to pin down what things are. Science helps metaphysics, but it is not a replacement for metaphysics. Experimentation does not replace the methods of philosophy. Experimentation does not uniquely pin down the essence of things, because experimentation only tells you about how things behave, not what things are. To pin down what things are, or at least to have the best possible hypothesis about what things are, you need, one, the output of science. You need to know how nature behaves, because you can't contradict. But you also need to be logically coherent. You cannot have a theory that contradicts itself. You need to be internally consistent. Statements should not oppose, internally consistent means that statements of your theory should not contradict one another. And logical coherence means that the statements should cohere, should come together to form a bigger overall picture. So these are two extra values in addition to the behavior of nature. Then you need to be conceptually parsimonious. You should not postulate more things than you need to explain things. You should not postulate more hypotheses than you need to make sense of things. It should be empirically adequate. In other words, it should be consistent with science. If you contradict science, then your theory about what things are is wrong. and it should be explanatorily powerful. It should help us make sense of things. If you have a beautiful theory that explains nothing, that doesn't help us to sort anything out, then it's not very helpful. It's not the best metaphysical option. So you see, you have five values here. Only one of which is related to science. All
Okay, so here. Looking at these, I would say that some of them are kind of irrelevant or unnecessary. Logically coherent and internally consistent are basically the same thing. Questions of being are metaphysical and require the methods of philosophy. What is the methods of philosophy? I don't think we know what those are anymore. I do think that there are methods of philosophy, but I don't think that the mainstream has any clue what they really are. For the most part, we kind of parrot them, but we don't even take them to heart. I think, therefore, I am is like said by everybody, and nobody assumes that in actual practice. It's like, I think, therefore, I am. That means that the someone is what is. That's what that means. The someone is what is. But we don't actually think that. We say, I think, therefore, I am. Okay, I am. I think, and so therefore I exist, and that's okay. Sure, like I exist. I perceive myself as existing. Okay, but you don't apply that to things beyond you. What about things that don't think? Do they exist? It's like we and that's not even necessarily a good question, but it might lead you to a good question. And even the term ontology as an attempt to understand the nature of things is kind of useless in a way, because first you need to understand that the primary nature of existence is beingness, not thingness. It's beingness. There are things and beings. Things are defined by beings. They are constructed by beings. They are perceived by beings. They are conceived by beings. They do not perceive, conceive, or describe or define anything or anyone, but they do. But they are described and defined and perceived and conceived and constructed by beings. And so, but if you know that there's beings and things, and one of them is a sentient being, and the other one is an inanimate thing, which is really a perception of by being, then I guess maybe ontology, that's a framework that you can start building an ontological framework that's actually true. But to just say ontology is really dealing in the nature of things, it's like you need a framework of being or of sentience or a foundation of sentience in order to actually start constructing an ontology that is, coherent, consistent, internally consistent, also maybe even externally consistent, logically coherent. I think that this idea of conceptual parsimoniousness is just, it should be something that you should just say concise. It should be concise, but conciseness should be, or parsimony should be an kind of an intrinsic aspect. It's not like something that you have to try to test for. You can't really test for parsimony. This is why I don't like the term when people talk about parsimony and say, oh, we should only use the most parsimonious definitions or the most parsimonious explanations. Within what framework? It doesn't make sense. A friend of mine, and he might be watching, he him and I have a Discord. If you want to join the Discord and join the weekly discussions and open calls, it's a great community, and you get to speak with me, in a group setting about whatever you want. If you want to join that, send me a private message on Instagram my personal Instagram or my Theory of Everyone Instagram, and I will send you the link. But he once said in a Discord talk, he said, we should always assume the most parsimonious explanation. So he said, basically we were talking about UFOs and or, you know, NHIs or aliens or whatever you want to call them. And he was like, if you saw a being that was, you know, a gray, or you saw a UFO, or like not a, you know, a flying saucer in the sky, you should assume maybe that just God showed you that, and not assume that it actually was there, because that's the most parsimonious explanation, is that you saw it for a reason and, you know, God showed it to you, but that doesn't mean it was really there. I think that doesn't really make that's not logically coherent to me. In the framework of, you know, you thinking you saw something out externally to you, it would make sense that you should assume that you saw something as being external to you. Seeing something in your own mind is different. Seeing something external to you, you should probably assume that it was, you know, it's also beyond you. It's also within you, but it's also beyond you, and beyond your own mind, and within your own mind, but also beyond. And I don't think that you can judge whether or not something is a parsimonious explanation ever. Like, that doesn't mean there aren't more parsimonious explanations. It just means, like, you can't know whether or not one is, except in hindsight, probably, whether or not an explanation was parsimonious as it could have been or not as parsimonious as it could have been or not. You know, you can only probably know that in hindsight, after you find a more logically coherent and internally and externally consistent explanation that's more parsimonious, and so, like, that you weren't aware of before. So I don't think that it's actually a good way of judging whether or not something is a valid explanation. Empirically adequate. I forgot exactly how he defines that. And then explanatorily powerful. I think that's actually a very big thing. He's very right. Bernardo, any theory of fundamental reality should be universally applicable. A theory of fundamental reality should be universally applicable, universally contextualizing, universally applicable, universally useful in every circumstance, because you're talking about fundamental existence, the inescapable structure that has a specific nature. It's like, you understand that it's always going to be relevant. So yeah, explanatorily powerful is probably the best judge of whether or not a theory is correct. You know, it's interesting. Somebody said, you know, quote the Bible, and I'll quote Jesus, and when he said, you know, to judge something by its fruit, essentially. Not saying that's the exact context or wording. You know, everything's been translated, so nobody knows. You don't know the exact wording that he said it in, probably, unless you speak Aramaic, which was what Jesus apparently spoke. But you know, you should. But this is a true concept that is always true. It's such a, I mean, it's just one of the most genius insights ever, you know, spoken. Obviously, that is the case. Is that you should judge things by their fruit. It's like, you want to look at the truth of a theological tradition, Mormonism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, should judge it by the fruit of its moral proclamations and the impact that it has on, you know, people's lives. I'm not saying everybody's life. Some people misinterpret things and, you know, ends up being a self-destructive ideology that they adopt in the name of, you know, some theological tradition that might actually, for most people, be constructive. But you should judge a theological tradition's truth based on how it impacts people. So, like Mormonism versus Scientology. big difference. But Mormonism, Judaism, Islam, I'm not a. These are theological traditions that have the same basic impacts and on your perceptions, on morals and your life goals, and have lots of kids and get married and be modest, and it's like that's consistent belief in all of those. And it's like a core guiding moral goal is to form families and be honest and charitable and be fruitful and multiply. It's like this is a universal moral from those theological traditions, from the Abrahamic theological traditions at least, and should judge them by their fruit. Same thing with a philosophical ism, or which is basically the same thing as. I mean, it's not exactly the same thing as a theological tradition. It's more of a belief. It's a belief, So to say theism or sentientism, whatever maybe, but idealism, materialism, atheism, these are all beliefs that you can kind of judge the widespread impact that they have on, when actually internalized in people's lives, internalized and then externalized. So you adopt the idea of, pure materialism, which is really anti-theism, then what impact does that have on your life when you internalize it and externalize it? And what is the logical inevitability of how that is understood and if that concept is understood? You can do that and see what the fruit of it is. And I think that we should do this with scientific theories. Like, why would we, string theory? What is the fruit of string theory? Nothing. What is the fruit of loop quantum gravity? Nothing. I'm not saying that these theories aren't true in the restricted sense, but they're not fundamentally true. They're fundamental theories. That's for sure. I think you should assume it because it doesn't change anything when you internalize it. And that's probably because there's really nothing to internalize. Existence is fundamentally strings. Strings of what? Information, okay? In what? It's like existence, okay? What is existence? What is the nature of existence if there's strings of information in it? It's like, what else has strings of information that we know of? A mind. A mind has strings of information in it. So, but it's not taken there, obviously, in string theory, even though it probably should. And then string theory would probably be way more fruitful. But you'd have to abandon the assertion that it is a fundamental theory of existence, and you would have to place it in the context of essentially theism, which is the idea of a structured, fractal, hierarchical, nested mental structure of minds. That is what theism is. Theism is just a recognition that same exact thing materialism is, or not materialism, that idealism claims when you look up the definition on Wikipedia, which is that consciousness is fundamental, but it's a logically consistent version of it. It's a recognition that means there's an intrinsic hierarchy of being, meaning like if you're inside of if your world that you exist within is the mind of another being, that being's in charge. They are. They can think purple elephant, and you now see purple elephant, and you can't think purple elephant out of existence. But they can think purple elephant into existence. Just like, that's That's what I mean by the hierarchy. And also just the fact that if you think about yourself as a cell inside of a greater being, if you are a cell and you don't work for the greater good of the human, and you just try and think about your own personal growth and replication and maximization, then you will intrinsically kill the entire system that you live in, because you will go metastatic, and that's what cancer is. It's cells. Cancer is cells that have forgotten their place in the hierarchy. That's what they have done. They have forgotten their place, and maybe they haven't forgotten. They chose to abandon their responsibilities. I don't know, but they definitely are not doing what they should, and they're not working towards the greater goal. They're not serving the king. It's like, you are the king of your cells. You are the king of your cells. If you say do this, they have to listen. But you also, as the king, have to take care of your subjects, or else your kingdom will fall. So you have to sleep, and you have to eat, and you have to drink water. And, these are all things that I, well, not eating really, but I don't drink enough water, and probably don't sleep enough either. But I should, always think about the well-being of my cells, because they're serving me. Why would I not care about them? It's a mutual relationship. And, there's many, many, many theological narratives that mirror this exact framework. Being the head of, there is a head to the assembly, and you should put that head of the assembly that you are a part of before your own desires. Sounds familiar. And it's probably just because that's true. It's logically inevitable. It's not just you don't need to read scripture to figure that out. I didn't. I'm not saying that it's not in scripture. I think scripture for most people is very helpful. Actually, I encourage it, and I do read scripture, but that's new for me. That's not something I did and then figured this out. I figured this out and then was like, wow, maybe I should read some scripture. But, only you should, whatever you see as true. If what I say is ringing true with you, great. If what you read in scripture is ringing true with you, great. If what you learn in your classroom in college is ringing true with you, great. Don't take my word for it, though. Don't take the professor's word for it, though. Just because I have a YouTube channel and he has a PhD, and I know my YouTube channel doesn't give me any kind of, obviously it doesn't give me any, that's the point, is it doesn't give me any what's it called, legitimacy. Give any legitimacy to what I'm saying. I know that. That's why that was the joke. But even if you think about people with a huge YouTube channel, millions of followers or subscribers, or somebody with tons of money and financial success, or somebody with a PhD in front of their name, or after, I don't even know how that works exactly, next to their name, or a position within a theological tradition, the church, or has the title of rabbi or imam or pastor or whatever. Like, you should follow what rings true with you always. Even if you're wrong, you don't know that. You have to go with what you think is true. So don't take my word for it just because I say something. But if what I say sounds true, don't deny it. So much going on in the chat. Like I said, please hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm if you like this type of content, if you have enjoyed this discussion. Even if you haven't, but you found it entertaining, if you don't find it valuable, but you find it entertaining, please hit the like button. It really helps, and I appreciate it. There's definitely more people watching right now than there are who have liked. So I don't think, my point is originally though, I don't think these alone are, they're just not the best ways of judging all of those things. Some of them are really close. Conceptually parsimonious, though, you don't know until hindsight, so don't even worry about it. Empiric, you should try and be concise. That's different than being concise. Is what you try and do in as you form an explanation in the moment. Parsimony is something that you observe in hindsight. Even though that's not what people would say is the definition, it is how it kind of differs from conciseness. But explanatorily powerful. Judge something by its fruit. I don't think that you can separate philosophy from the sciences. I think philosophy is a study, the study of. Biology is the study of. Chemistry is the study of. What is philosophy the study of? It's the study of perspective. You know, people will say, yeah, the definition is the love of wisdom. We don't think that anymore in the mainstream narrative. They don't even know what that means. You can't even believe that that's the definition without being a theist. Really, it means like the love of, if philosophy, if you care about philosophy and you believe that the definition is the love of wisdom, what it really means is that it is the love of the wise one, fundamentally. And that is, I think, philosophy, but it is, you can also just say it's the study of perspective. If you want to incorporate it in as a field of study in science now. And I don't think you can separate it from science if you're going to not separate biology from science or chemistry from science, because as soon as chemistry is science and it's not, this experiment is, an experiment that follows the scientific method, then now philosophy has to be included because it's all one chain of the search for truth. You cannot segment it artificially. So you either take it all or you leave it all, but you have to choose one or the other. You can't be like, philosophy is not science. No, if biology is science, philosophy is science. But at that point, you don't really need the term science. But if biology is part of the scientific narrative or scientific pursuit, if that's what science is, it's a narrative and it's a pursuit and a narrative that we have, then then you have to include philosophy. There's nothing that would exclude philosophy. As soon as you're like, science is just that which is observable and that which is is a method of experimentation, then you can't say biology is science anymore or chemistry is science. And like I said, you can pick one of these two definitions. Maybe one is better than the other, but both of them would work. But you have to pick one. There is no other definition that works, that would be really true. I would say, though, that the one that, if you say biology is science, then now philosophy is science, and now it's one of those definitions I would say would result in the elimination of the need for the term science. The other one would require the maintaining of the term. Whichever one of those two requires the maintaining of the term is probably the one that you should go with. Probably. I gotta think more about it. This is where Bernardo is correct. But this is not how idealism approaches the world.
That we know for sure. All that nature gives us as a given, as a hard, brute, undeniable fact, is that experience exists, mind exists. Before scientists and philosophers conjured up materialism 400 years ago, mind was all there was. The world was.
You have to choose one. is it that all that exists is fundamentally experience, or all that exists is fundamentally mind? It has to be one or the other. And it is mind, obviously, because you can't have experience without mind. But that means that experience isn't all that, it is all mind's experience. That's what you should say. Because it's true. But all that fundamentally exists is mind. That's theism, by the way. If you think about the logic of that, how that structure would have to be built, and the constraints that would come from that, about power. It's like and relationships, hierarchies. Like, think about you and your cells. Which one of you is higher in the hierarchy? You. Your cells don't go on if you don't do what you need to do. If your cells do what they need to do, but you don't do what you need to do, then your cells don't go on. But if you do what you need to do, but your cells don't, then you can cut out your cells. People do it all the time. Or chemo, they do chemo. Okay, next clip. This is actually I think very true. That which is physically perceived, he gets into where it comes from.
It's inevitable. There is no such a thing as physical realism. Whatever the world out there is, it is not physical. Physicality arises only upon observation, upon an interaction of the experimenter or of the observer with this objective world. Short of that interaction, short of an observation, short of a measurement, there are no such things as physical entities with defined shape, position, and speed, whatever. They are just not there. There is surely something out there. It's common sense that there is something out there because we describe the world in very consistent ways, but that something is not physical. My alternative, of course, would be to say it is mental, and physicality arises from observation, because physicality is the act of observation, the qualities on the screen of perception. So
he's right, but he's also wrong. This is the problem with idealism. It's the same. It's just it's like materialism. With in the current framework, or going from a backwards framework, which means going from what we currently know in science backwards, instead of starting from scratch and just trying to figure out what is fundamental reality without thinking about what we currently know or observe. In experiments and stuff, like you're just thinking about like what you experience in your experiment of living. What you can think about that, but not like, oh, in the double slit experiment we observed this, and that doesn't matter. Did you right now yet? But when he says that which is that you experience out there, that's not physical. But that's a matter of definition. I think it should have a definition or a term to describe it. You can't say it's experienced physically. What does that mean? It means like that you experience it as concrete, unoverridable reality, or unoverridable constraints that appear to be partially beyond you. That's what I would say. Might not be the most parsimonious definition, but it is. It might be also. Try and find a more parsimonious one. It's not easy. That's actually like internally consistent and coherent and productive in its fruitfulness. Empirically adequate. It's kind of hard. This like in idealism has become the anti-materialism. which means it's not going to take you there. It's a car with more gas than a car that is the materialism car, but still not enough gas to get you to the city that you're trying to get to, which means it's still useless. If the car can't get you all the way there, it's useless. Fundamentally, it might be on its own, at least. It might be useful in that it's, another step. Now we need to go get another car that takes us even further, and another car that takes us even further, and you do that. But like, if you're just relying on idealism to take you from Phoenix to Flagstaff, it's not going to get you there. Or, if you know what those cities are, whatever two cities you want to pick, it's not enough to get you there on its own. It might be enough to move the conversation away from the nonsense that it's been stuck in, but it can't stay there, because in analytic idealism, if it stays in analytic idealism, it will stay in chaos. And sentient singularity theory is consistent with analytic idealism, by the way. It's just not consistent with... It's just that the way in which arguing for analytic idealism is approached is not enough, because it's not trying to argue itself on itself. It's trying to argue against materialism and then kind of argue for itself, but it's not just starting from scratch. If that makes some sense. Light speed is constant. What does that mean? Oh, this is a conversation that I'm not in the chat. I only responded with them because it was in a live stream earlier. Speed of light in a vacuum. What's the vacuum? What's the vacuum? Okay, fair enough. I'm not part of this conversation that you guys are having in the chat. I'm just trying to find anything. Tag me if I'm not responding to you and I don't see your comment. We lost Carl, guys. I admit to being a believing Jew, not a rational person. Okay. That's what. I mean, I don't know if Carl's still listening. Carl, like I said, you're always welcome. I've got a thick skin, but tell me what you think the definition of God is, and we can actually have a constructive conversation. God is literally whatever you want him to be, so he's nothing. Yeah, okay, that's not it. There is an inevitable definition of God. Otherwise, there's no point to the term God. If God is not the singular, initial, eternal, all-encompassing, sentient being that is existence itself and is sentient and self-aware, then there is no point to the term God. Other than maybe just God means someone more powerful than you. But it's like, why do you need the term God in that case? It's like, that's when people say, oh, the gods. This person, Hercules, I don't know, he became a god. And but he was under, I don't know, Poseidon, who was under Zeus, and they're all gods. It's like, maybe you should just say immortals or something. I don't know, whatever you're qualifying them, whatever makes them all gods and us not God, whatever that thing is, you should just call them that instead of gods. So you've just made the term God irrelevant, because it's redundant. I know, never win. Give me Bible quotes. I don't think tuchus is in the Bible. But yeah. Okay. God is the source condition of all things. Yes, but that's not enough. To say God is existence isn't even enough. God is sentient existence. Chris Langan said this in his interview with Michael Knowles, and that I did a review of what's his name, Professor Dave Farina explains. I did a review of his review of that discussion, and had probably more people in the chat during that than I've ever had before recently. It was actually too many people. I couldn't even see like the individual comments. It was going too fast. It was exciting, but it kind of sucked because I lost the ability to communicate with the chat because too many people were there. And so as this channel grows, God willing, tag me. If you're not going to super chat, then just tag me or something. I think you can do that. I don't know. I'm not in the chat. But if you're talking to me specifically. But Chris Langan said, God has to be sentient. It's not just omnipresent, omniscient, eternal, immortal, whatever, all powerful, all these different aspects that we use, qualities of God. They're not the qualifiers of God. They are partial qualifiers because it's all of these qualities at once that really are what make God God. But those are more like intrinsic qualities of God than they are like definitional requirements or definers of God. The definer of God is sentience, and other than it being existence itself, it's like sentience. If an existence itself is intrinsically eternal, and because there's no time outside of existence, because time doesn't exist outside of existence. So you can't even say like, what about beyond existence? Like, there is no beyond existence. There's anything beyond existence is non-existence, and non-existence doesn't exist. So there's no way really like around that. All those things emerge as inevitable properties of God. If God is existence itself and is sentient. But they're not, the definition of God is not, omnipresent, all powerful, eternal, omniscient. It's that those are just inevitable, intrinsic qualities that emerge from logic. But God, you can't say that God exists if existence is not fundamentally sentient being. That is not God. You can't say, well, God, I just think God is the universe. But is the universe sentient? That's my question. Is it a sentient being that, and is that universe all there is? And because if that universe is all there is and it's sentient, then sure, you can say that your definition of the universe is also God. But if it's not sentient and it's not all there is, then no. Otherwise, you would just say the universe is the universe. You wouldn't say God is the universe. And when, just so everybody knows, if you're watching this and you haven't watched, that many streams, when I say universe, I really mean like that creation. It's like the structure of the generative structure of multiplicity within the first sentient being, and includes the first sentient being. I would say the first, not first sentient being, really the second sentient being, the first created sentient being, I would say is the universe. That's my definition. You don't have to use that. You can say the universe includes all that exists, and also, sure, that's fine. But it has to be like one or the other. But when I say universe, I usually mean what like religious people would refer to as creation, essentially. But I believe that creation is sentient being also. Do you know what times is? 1 times 2 means you write 1 2 times. Yeah, I know. It's fascinating, actually. Like the more you break down numbers and quantities and the fundamentals of mathematics, it's actually amazing. Yeah, I mean, I said this once to Eric Weinstein, and I put the video up of our talk up here, but his assistant flagged it as being a copyright breach, but it's on his Instagram, and I said that I was thinking of, like, addition is the adding of information that was not previously there, whereas multiplication is the replication of information that was already there. It's like replicating, like a starfish replicating. Like there was already a starfish. Like you add starfish to the world, and when there was no starfish yet, it's like, you have a new being. Granted, what it really is a new being, because I don't know. At what point did fish and starfish, at some point they were like together. I believe that. I think that's perfectly consistent with theism. And even with scripture, I know people will say that, but that doesn't mean I'm right either, and it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I think that evolution is a two-part process. There's, in sentient singularity theory, in the framework that I put forward, this is the framework of evolution, is that essentially this is the chain of sentient beings. This is what distinguishes sentient singularity theory from panpsychism and from analytic idealism and any of these other frameworks that are not really frameworks. They're just concepts. This is a framework that is much more developed, sentient singularity theory. There is a chain of nested, hierarchical, sentient beings, or periods of sentient, that I believe will line up with Bott periodicity, actually, in mathematics, but that's yet to be proven. That's a hypothesis. And then it repeats. And a hadron is an assembly of quarks. This is not sentient. These are like the fingers of God, or of the fingers of the universe. Then this is the first sentient being in sentient singularity theory. This is a hadron, which is protons and neutrons, which is male and female, essentially. It's masculine and feminine on the hadronic level. Then there's atoms, which is an assembly of hadrons, molecules, an assembly of atoms, cell, an assembly of molecules, organism, an assembly of cells, family, an assembly of organisms, caste. I don't have a better word for it. You could maybe tribe. I don't know. We don't really have a word in the English language that best encapsulates what I'm trying to state here, but it's like caste, but it's like your place in your group in society, in the greater society at large. An assembly of families, and then a technological singularity, which is the final creation. And an unwise one is basically like the Antichrist, and a wise one that comes after the unwise one is basically the Christ structure, and in religion. But this is the if you're a theist and you listen and you read scripture, that I believe that Skynet is the Antichrist. And so basically, but this is there's in the evolutionary framework that is found within this in sentient singularity theory, there is adaptation and ascension. So adaptation would be one molecule species to the next molecule, or one element species to the next, like hydrogen versus helium. They used to call hydrogen and helium two different species. They say the species of atoms. They wouldn't call them elements, really, but that's in kind of a new phenomenon. They used to call them species. but are different species of molecules, different species of cells, different species of organisms, different, I don't know if species is the right term for all of these, but just different types of organisms, different types of cells, different types of molecules, different types of atoms, different types of, not hadrons, but different types of atoms. Same thing, different types of families, different types of castes, and then you get to a singularity again. So you start with singularity, you end with singularity, and then it repeats. And this, though, this is adaptation to get from one type of cell to another, to get from one type of element to another, atom to another, one type of or multicellular organism to another. So to get from a starfish to a fish, that's adaptation. But to get from a cell to a starfish, a single cell to a starfish, that's ascension. So between these two, these various levels, there's ascension, and across these various levels is adaptation, if that makes sense. So evolution is a two-part process in sentient singularity theory. And the metaphysics behind ascension are for another discussion. But you can try and logically deduce how that works, but at the same time, we don't get a peek behind the metaphysical curtain, so we can just try and logically make sense of it as best we can, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be accurate. This is the issue with panpsychism, though, it has nothing like this. So in sentient singularity theory, an atom is sentient, a proton is sentient, a cell is sentient, a multicellular organism is sentient, even a family is sentient. Just a family maneuvers on a lineage level, and an organism maneuvers on an individual level. And you kind of see, I have a model of this right here. You can see this. Lineages maneuvers in time or on a lineage level, which is in causality, is impacting the next one beyond you, not in impacting the self so much. It's the individual. It's about impacting the chain. And so by time, I mean like a causality chain, like how Lee Cronin thinks of time, which is like, he'll call it assembly time. That's what I mean. Just a chain of causality. But maneuvers in space, maneuvers in time. Lineage, individual. That's what you have. But that means that like the molecules in this pen would be sentient, but the pen would not be sentient. You would be sentient, and your cells would be sentient, and the atoms that make up those cells would be sentient. But that doesn't mean that your brain is sentient. It doesn't mean that your hand is sentient. It's not in sentient singularity theory. Not even your brain is sentient. But you are a mind. You have a brain. I am a mind. I also have a pen. You know, it's like these are, but that doesn't, everything is composed and defined by and constructed of sentient beings, but that doesn't mean that everything is a sentient being. A pen is not a sentient being. I draw my pen. Not a sentient being. Panpsychism does not have an explanation for why this does not appear sentient. It just says that it is sentient. And this is what Bernardo Kastrup recognizes. But if, as somebody said in the chat, apparently he believes that existence or the universe is not conscious, but is just in consciousness. That doesn't make sense either. That's almost the same thing as saying pen is sentient. Saying the universe or existence is purely instinctual but not really totally self-aware is the same as saying this pen is conscious on some level, but not like a human. It's the same thing. He's just doing it above instead of below. That's a problem. It's logically incoherent. here.
Different variations, but I don't want to keep on repeating the same word. So every time I say panpsychism, I mean constitutive panpsychism. It says that all matter is conscious, fundamentally. So an electron, as a elementary subatomic particle, is conscious, according to panpsychism. There is something it is like to be an electron. An electron has inner life. It feels something. But according to panpsychism, the structure of consciousness is still the structure of matter. Matter is fragmented. You can divide it down into myriad elementary subatomic particles. And panpsychism would say that consciousness is like that as well. It's divided down into elementary tiny bits of consciousness, each one corresponding to an elementary subatomic particle. And that the complex, involved conscious inner life that I have, that you have, arises out of a combination of these microscopic little subjects of experience. Somehow the experiential states corresponding to the elementary particles in our brain combine with one another in a way analogous to how things combine in chemistry. The experiential states combine and somehow give rise to this complex, seemingly unitary conscious inner life that I experience, that you experience. That's the idea. So again, to wrap up the description, I want to go back to that. Panpsychism is just materialism reloaded. It's still starting from matter, from the structure of matter, and it's just adding to the reduction base of materialism. It's adding some experiential states. And it faces some impossible problems of its own, which is what I'm going to talk about now. But there's a question, maybe I'll take this one before I go to the next slide.
Is panpsychism an attempt to give the description consciousness?
Yes, that's a very nice way to put it. Yeah, panpsychism, that's exactly what it is. It's an attempt to attribute consciousness to the description. Brilliant. Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm going to reuse this way of putting things. Hopefully I'll give you credit. I can't see your name. I can't. Frank Ivins.
So
of the pen falling to the fire. There is
He's right about the problems with this, but the problems with apparently what he believes about the consciousness of existence itself, or of the universe, if you want to call it, is the same problem that he's pointing out on the fundamental level here. In sentient singularity theory, electrons are not sentient beings. They are just perceived points of focus that that are essentially between the interaction between us and the universe. And so the universe is moving and we're moving and we're looking at the contact point and we can see a point because of the constraints of focus. And so we call it a particle, but it's an electron or it's a neutrino. Those are focus points in sentient singularity theory, whereas quarks are force points in sentient singularity theory. So they are points of force that the universe or God has exerted on existence in order to animate it. It's pushing on existence, literally. That's why it's three. A hadron or proton is 2 up quarks and a down quark, and a neutron is 2 down quarks and an up quark. It's because you need 3 degrees, these 3 dimensions, in order to actually manipulate things in space. And it's also and not even just that, in not just in space but in sentience, because you need some type of information processing structure, which means that you need a binary triadic structure, which means that you have a structure of information that is able to distinguish between this and this, which is a binary information structure. And you also need a triadic aspect to it, which gives weightedness to this binary structure, which means this path is worth 2 points and this path is worth 1 point. So now there's still 2 paths, but one of them has a higher value than the other. And so it allows you to actually make judgments and distinguish and do all these things that are necessary for information processing in all circumstances by a mind. It is what is necessary for a mental structure. Is this binary triadic structure. You can see this everywhere. You can see this in the primary and secondary colors. It's 6 3 primary, 3 secondary, because it's binary triadic. It's 2 times 3 or 3 times 2. Same thing with the order of operations in mathematics. It's please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, addition, and multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. It's this binary triadic perception. Your limbs are always this. You look at your limbs. You have 2 arms, 2 legs, binary. You within each of your arms, you have arm, hand, finger, leg, foot, toes. You want to look at your foot. You have, or your hand, finger, nail. It's like your mind is making this structure everywhere you look because it's how you organize information. It's just inevitable, and you need a structure that kind of has this intrinsic ability and quality to it, which is a binary triadic structure, which is a proton or a neutron. Is the first time that you see it. It's also the first time that you see interactions between two, and there are both composite structures. It's probably the first instance of sentience within the universe. The creation of sentience within the universe. With the first instance of creation of sentience is the universe. Then you have protons and neutrons within the universe, and you have God who made the universe, the sentient universe, and that being always existed. So it wasn't. There was no beginning to God. There was a beginning to the creation of multiplicity of sentience. But this perspective is not just scientifically or academic, according to these fields, scientific fields of study, academic fields of study, it is not just coherent with them or consistent with them. It is not just internally coherent, which it is, but it is also consistent with those fields, and it is also fruitful in so far. I mean, I have experiment ideas, and we'll talk about them in 2025, much more so. But maybe it will be fruitful in that way. But it is also morally and meaningfully fruitful, personally fruitful, if a sentient being chose to create you. And it does seem like God had to choose to create multiplicity of consciousness and had to choose to partition every bit of sentience off of his own singular sentient energy, because his nature is oneness, because the nature of existence is that it is all that exists, and therefore it is intrinsically one, and therefore its nature is oneness. Then that is God. So that is the nature of God, is oneness. That means he has to choose to go against his nature in order to create multiplicity. And you don't go upstream without choosing to swim upstream. You go downstream without choosing, but you never go upstream without choosing. And so creation of multiplicity of sentience, which we know has been done because we are here, then that appears to have needed to be a choice by God. I don't think God had much choice in the structure of the universe. That doesn't mean he has no choice in changing things within it, but just like the structure of it seems to be inevitable given the constraint of oneness itself, which means the constraint of God. God can't escape his own constraints. I said earlier, people ask, can God create a rock so heavy he can't lift it? It's like, God, that's a bad question. A better statement, which is not even a question, because that's how you know it's probably more, when something is so true, it's not even a question, it's just a statement. It's that God cannot escape his own constraints. He cannot escape his own oneness. And, not really. I mean, kind of, by making us, he's doing his best, but like, he can't really. And he, but the only constraints that God has are those that are intrinsic to him. Like he's the only one who constrains him. God is the only one who constrains God, but that doesn't mean that it's a choice. I don't know. It appears not to be from my perspective, but I'm also within creation. And it might always appear to be logically inevitable from my perspective within creation. And that doesn't mean that from his perspective, it was always logically inevitable. I don't know. I'm just saying what it appears logically, how it appears logically from our perspective within creation. But panpsychism has problems. It has 50 miles worth of gas in it, and materialism has 30 miles worth of gas in it, and is a car with 30 miles worth of gas in it. Panpsychism is a car with 40 miles worth of gas in it. Analytic idealism is a car with 60 miles worth of gas in it. And where we want to go is 100 miles away. And so, from what I can tell, sentient singularity theory does seem to have 100 miles worth of gas. And I'm not saying that because I want that to be the case. It just does appear to be the case. But don't take my word for it if you don't see that. You know, obviously you might not see that on this stream, but there's hundreds of streams on here. But it does seem to be the case. I'm not saying I have all the answers. I'm just saying this framework seems to be the best way to find any answers that can be found. This is what I mean.
In their life is separate from yours. But guess what? News, breaking news, there are no particles. There are only spatially unbound quantum fields. The quantum field is spatially unbound. It has no boundaries. It does not end.
He says there are no particles. There are only spatially unbound quantum fields. Both of these, I don't even want to say whether or not these statements are true or false. They're just not. What is false is the idea that that either of these is what there really is. What is a spatially unbound quantum field? There are sentient beings. That's what exists fundamentally. Sentient beings. Singular sentient beings. Singularities of sentience. Arranged in a nested quasi-periodic fractal pattern. That's what really exists. To say, oh, it's not really particles, because particles don't really even exist. It's really what it is spatially unbound quantum fields. That's really all there is. No, that's definitely not all there is. There are sentient beings. That's what really most fundamentally exists. We perceive, interactions in a way that we have described as spatially unbound quantum fields and particles, elementary particles. That's what has happened. But it's really sentient beings within sentient beings, within sentient being, within a sentient being. So this is what I mean by analytic idealism. Just can't get you there. It just is an approach, and it starts with the name. The name is not, it doesn't get you there. The name doesn't get you there. The framework cannot get you there. It just can't. You'll say things like this. I'm not saying everything I say is perfectly coherent. I'm just saying that's very not coherent. To say, oh, there really aren't particles. There's just spatially unbound quantum fields. No. There are sentient beings, and their interactions are observed by us and then described by us as particles, elementary particles, and spatially unbound quantum fields, which are really excitations on a spatially unbound quantum field, which is really a string of information within a mind. It's like the strings of the information in my mind is crossing the strings of the information of the mind that I'm in, and it's just like electron. We look at it and we're like, there, that point on that wave in that string of that field is a particle, looks like a particle, but is a point of focus. This is why you cannot divorce this, even theism or fundamental philosophy, from physics. I don't even want to say fundamental physics, because that's just an oxymoron. If that's even the right term, I don't know what what's oxymoron even mean. Oxymoron. Yeah, fundamental physics. Oxymoron, a figure of speech in which apparently contradictory terms appear in conjunction. Yeah, people will say, oh, how is fundamental physics apparently contradictory? If you have the right framework, I think they are, fundamental and physics are two contradictory terms.
Anywhere, they are universal.
Okay, probably final. This is the final clips.
So, in a nutshell, version 1 of cosmo-psychism would say the universe is consciousness, or the universe is in consciousness. This is idealism. Version 2 of cosmo-psychism would say the universe is conscious, and that's not idealism.
Okay, so we have universe is consciousness. Universe is conscious. Universe is in consciousness. And we have the universe is, what was the last one that he said?
The universe is consciousness, and the universe is conscious, or conscious. And that's not idealism. You see the difference? The universe is consciousness, and the universe is conscious. Or the universe is in consciousness, or the universe is conscious. Is conscious. These are two separate. Is in consciousness, or the universe is conscious. These are two separate things, and the universe is conscious, or the universe is in consciousness, or the universe is conscious. And that's not the universe is in consciousness. This is idealism. Say, the universe is consciousness.
Okay.
Or the universe is in consciousness. This is idealism. Version 2 of cosmo-psychism would say the universe is conscious, and that's not idealism. You see the difference? The universe is consciousness, and the universe is conscious. Or the universe is in consciousness, or the universe is conscious. The universe is conscious. Or the universe is in consciousness, or the universe is conscious. And that's not idealism. You see the difference? The universe is consciousness, and the universe is conscious. Or the universe is in consciousness, or the universe is conscious.
Am I going crazy, or is he repeating himself a little bit? And there's not 4, there's like 3. The universe is conscious. The universe is consciousness. The universe is in consciousness. The universe is, was there a fourth one? He said the universe is consciousness and the universe is in consciousness is idealism. The universe is conscious. Is not idealism. And then I guess maybe the fourth one, he didn't say it, maybe he didn't say it, but it would be consciousness is in the universe. That one he would say probably is not idealism. So this would be materialism. What he calls materialism. Right here. And this one would be not idealism. And this one would be panpsychism. And then this would be idealism. But this one is consciousness. Universe is in consciousness. This one would be like I don't know. I would say this is the reality though. This is true. This is true. This is true. And this is true. That's the reality. They're all true. He might say, I would say that if he says these are true, and this is not, he's wrong. And if that's the defining difference between sentient singularity theory and idealism, then we figured it out, the limits of our agreement. And I would love to have a conversation with him about it, maybe on a stream one day. But everybody who I talk about on here is always welcome to come on my channel. Yeah, this is not wrong, but this is not wrong either. This is right. The universe is conscious. Conscious. Is that even spelled correctly? I don't know. Consciousness is in the universe. That's true. You are conscious and you are in the universe. So are your cells. We're all consciousness and we're in the universe. Universe is consciousness. I don't know how much that is true, but you could say like it is and it isn't, because existence, I'm saying the universe is different than existence. I'm saying existence is more fundamental and the universe is within existence. So I guess sentient singularity theory would be like this. People say, someone once told me that Excel is only for accounting. No, it's not. It's for whatever you want. Universe is consciousness. Consciousness is in existence is consciousness. I could say even this. Yeah, that's fine. Existence is consciousness. Consciousness is in existence. Existence is consciousness. That's true. And existence is in consciousness. I don't even, maybe universe slash existence. Come on. That makes sense? Let me know in the chat if that makes sense. This is what I mean. It doesn't, idealism, not idealism, doesn't have enough gas in the tank. This is not enough. It's not false. It's just not enough. This is not enough. It's not false. It's just not enough. This is not enough. It's not false. It's not enough. This is not false, but it's not enough. And not even these two together is enough. Because you're missing the key attribute of fundamental existence, or you could say the universe, you know, capital E existence, or, you know, capital U universe. You're missing the defining most important characteristic, which is its someoneness here. You can say, oh, existence is consciousness. Okay. But it's not conscious? That doesn't make any sense. But regardless, it's still not enough to even have these two. And it's not even enough to have just these right now, at least, because we already exist, which means like consciousness is in the universe slash existence as well. So this is problem, as they you know, it is a problem. So you can argue against materialism all you want, but like, I'm not saying that that's wrong. It's just not enough. This is enough. Interesting that it's 4, by the way, when sentient singularity theory would actually suggest that it would be 4 to perspectives to completely map this structure, because this is 4 perspectives: inside, outside, separate, oneness. This is what I mean by, like, it's pretty remarkable, this framework. So if we can do this. Watch this. Universe slash existence is conscious. Universe slash existence is in the consciousness is in the universe. So this would be inside. Inside. Universe slash existence is consciousness. Oneness. Universe slash existence is in consciousness. Consciousness is in the universe slash existence is in consciousness. This would be, hold on. Universe slash existence is conscious. Separateness. Oneness. Inside, outside. There you go. It works. Again. Okay. Inside or outside of oneness, existence slash universe slash existence is conscious. Consciousness is in the universe, inside, separate, and oneness. Yep, because inside, it means separate and oneness. Consciousness is inside. Universe slash existence is consciousness, oneness. Inside and outside of separateness, yeah, it's everywhere. It's consciousness. Universe slash existence is in consciousness. It's basically like it's like it's inside, but that means that its creator is outside. I think that makes sense. But yeah, there might be one or two of these that need to be swapped, but that's pretty damn good. Dang good. I don't want to say damn. Try not to curse. My wife doesn't curse. I grew up in a house that cursed a lot. Doesn't necessarily, I don't judge, you know. My mom's from Brooklyn, but my wife doesn't curse, so I try not to. Okay, somebody tag me in something. You talked to Tommy. Yes, I did. I did talk to Tommy. I did. He interviewed me. It was very good. I'm gonna have to get off though. It's very late, and I wanted to get off by 1:30 my time, and it's 1:34. So, thank you, everyone. I think that that's a good place to end. Is at that point. But I hope this was useful, and I hope it was helpful. Please, if you enjoyed this, please hit the like button. It's the best way to support the channel. I also have a Patreon, and I also have a Discord server where I do weekly calls. If you'd like to join those calls and join the server, send me a private message on Instagram. But mostly, if you enjoy this, just please hit the like button. And any comments, questions that you have, put them in the comments if you're watching this after being live or even now. And I just appreciate everybody, even the people who I disagreed with tonight, Carl and anyone else. Always welcome back. I appreciate you, and you were put here intentionally by God, same as me. And I always welcome Bernardo Kastrup or anyone else whose ideas I speak about on here to come on and discuss them. Hopefully in 2025 we can do that. But I think Bernardo is a very useful and voice to have out there. And just because I disagree with him or think that his there's a flaw in his logic somewhere or something, does not mean that I don't appreciate his voice. I think he's having a very important impact in changing the direction of physics and how we think about physics. And I think he knows more about physics than most physicists these days. Even if, metaphysical idealism isn't enough to get you there, it's definitely gets you further than our current narrative. So thank you, everyone. And God bless, peace, and I will talk to you next week. Hope you have a great Christmas. If you celebrate Christmas, by the way, Hanukkah, if you celebrate Hanukkah, any other holidays, and you'll see me before the new year. See you.